I never imagined that losing weight would lead to me being in the middle of a workplace drama, but here I am, sharing my story, hoping to find some clarity. Just a few months ago, I was sitting in an office cubicle, feeling overwhelmed and self-conscious, my body holding onto extra pounds that I had come to accept as part of me. But after a serious health scare, I decided to get serious about my fitness. I spent countless hours in the gym, swapped fast food for salads, and traded late-night Netflix binges for evening runs. Gradually, the scales tipped in my favor, and before I knew it, I had shed nearly 30 pounds. With my newfound confidence, I felt ready to take on the world, or at least my job at the marketing agency. As my clothes started to feel comically oversized, I figured I could do something nice with them. Enter Jenna, one of my coworkers who had been struggling with her own weight issues. We had shared a few conversations where she spoke about her desire to lose weight but was struggling to find motivation. One afternoon, as we sipped our afternoon coffees, I jokingly offered her some of my old clothes, their vibrant colors ready to be appreciated by someone who needed a confidence boost. Her initial reaction was laughter, and she brushed off the idea, but I could see a flicker of interest in her eyes. It felt good to offer her a lifeline, a way to feel better about herself without the financial burden of new clothes. However, I didn't anticipate the controversy it would stir. The next day, I approached her again, this time presenting a neatly folded pile of blouses and blazers from my closet. "I really think you'd look great in these," I said, feeling a bit sheepish but genuinely hoping to help. But then, her face fell. "I appreciate the thought, but I really don't want your hand-me-downs," she replied, her voice tight. I felt my heart sink. I was only trying to be helpful. But Jenna's discomfort didn't stop there. Over the next few days, I started to notice a shift in our interactions. She became distant, not just with me but with the whole team, as if the mere act of my offering had changed the energy in the room. I found myself questioning everything. Did I overstep? Was I the insensitive jerk that some pieces of the office gossip suggested? I thought things were innocent enough. I only wanted to share some clothes that I wasn't using. Days turned into weeks, and all our mutual acquaintances began commenting, whispering about my offer that had supposedly hurt Jenna's feelings. Each time I heard someone mention it, I felt a sting of regret, swirling like a storm in my gut. I wanted to reach out again, to clarify and apologize, but whenever I saw her in the break room, my heart raced, and I clamped my mouth shut. I worried about being seen as the villain instead of the supportive coworker I aimed to be. My stomach ached, and I felt all the confidence I had gained slowly begin to slip away. Finally, after a particularly tough week where the tension was palpable in the air, I decided enough was enough. I needed closure, not for my sake but for Jenna's too. I invited her for coffee, just the two of us. I took a deep breath, my heart drumming loudly as I sat across from her. "Jenna, I'm genuinely sorry if I crossed a line. I only wanted to help." She looked at me with this mixture of sadness and frustration, and for a moment, silence filled the space between us. Then she spoke, softer than I expected. "It's just, I've been struggling, you know? And being offered clothes when I already feel like a failure? It felt like I was being given a reminder of everything I didn't achieve." As those words sank in, I realized that my intentions, no matter how good, had missed the mark entirely. After our talk, a weight lifted, and I could see the flicker of understanding in her eyes. We hadn't solved anything major that day, but we were able to at least acknowledge the issues around our insecurities and how they intertwined with our friendship. I promised myself to be more careful moving forward, knowing that sometimes, a helping hand can accidentally feel like a shove. As I walked back to my desk, a thought struck me: maybe we can't fix everything, but we can be honest about our feelings. I hoped this wasn't the end for Jenna and me but instead the beginning of a more genuine connection. A few weeks later, while cleaning out my closet again, I thought of her. I held onto those clothes but not out of guilt or as a reminder of my past, but as a nod to the complicated yet beautiful ways our paths crossed, forever reminding me to tread more gently in such delicate situations. The thoughts of Jenna lingered in my mind like the lingering scent of fading perfume, the good kind, the kind that brings back warmth rather than sadness. I spent the next few weeks navigating the delicate balance of our workplace dynamic. Each time I caught a glimpse of her, I felt a tug in my chest. She was becoming more than just a coworker, she was a reminder of empathy and understanding, the raw connection that can emerge from vulnerability. I remember one afternoon, I noticed Jenna in the break room, her shoulders slumped slightly as she stirred her coffee, lost in thought. I hesitated at the entrance, unsure if I should join her or give her space. But something nudged me forward, a quiet urge to ask, so I did. "Hey, you okay?" I ventured, my voice softer than I intended, slightly tinged with concern. Jenna looked up, surprise flickering across her face before she managed a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just tired, you know?" she replied, but I could see the walls still standing. Instead of prying, I settled into a nearby chair, and we exchanged small talk, laughing about mundane things, each joke momentarily peeling back layers of her guarded demeanor. It felt good, like we were slowly weaving a new tapestry of friendship, a new bond built on honesty rather than the remnants of misunderstanding. Then one evening, as I sat on my bed staring at the growing mountain of clothes I had set aside for donation, a sudden urge overcame me. Maybe, just maybe, I could offer some of them to Jenna. I gathered a few pieces that I thought would suit her style, things I had loved, but now felt like remnants of someone else's life. I imagined her face lighting up as she tried them on, the tentative joy mirrored in her appreciative smile. But the moment I sealed that bag, doubt snuck in like a cold breeze through an open window. What if she took it the wrong way? What if it reminded her of her own struggles with weight and self-acceptance? The very last thing I wanted was for her to feel any sense of embarrassment or inadequacy. Still, I made a decision. I wouldn't let fear steer me clear of taking a chance to show kindness. The next day at work, I approached her after a meeting, heart racing as I felt the weight of the garment bag in my hands. "Hey, Jenna, do you have a minute?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked curious but cautious, and as I revealed the bag, I could practically see the gears turning in her mind. "These are some clothes I thought you might like. If you want them, great, if not, that's perfectly okay, too." Her eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and uncertainty flashing across her face. I watched her expression closely, fearing I'd overstepped. To my relief, she took a small step forward, reaching out to touch the fabric. "Really? You'd part with these?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, and something about the vulnerability in her tone struck me. Here was someone who was beginning to peel back her own layers of insecurity, too. We spent a few moments going through the bag together. I noticed the way her nervous fingers grazed over the fabric, and I smiled when she found a favorite piece, an old cardigan I used to wear constantly. "This is really cute," she said, holding it up to her frame, and for the first time, I saw her smile genuinely, unfettered by her worries, and it felt like the sun breaking through clouds. Our conversation soon drifted to our shared experiences of battling our own reflections, and I could feel the barriers crumbling even further. She told me about her struggles with body image, and I found myself opening up about mine, an unexpected weight lifting as I articulated feelings I had kept bottled inside for years. But what surprised me most was the raw understanding that rippled between us, the way it felt like we were both navigating a path through the shadows of our past. When we parted that day, I had a flicker of hope in my chest, a small, glowing ember signaling that yes, maybe I hadn't messed things up completely with Jenna after all. Instead, perhaps we were finding something much stronger together, a connection that embraced our imperfections and uncertainties. A couple of weeks passed, and I noticed how our conversations deepened. Each friendly exchange, each shared laugh unfurled layers of kindness that illuminated our workdays. Eventually, I received a text from her late one evening, simple but profound. "Thank you for being so understanding, and for the clothes. Your kindness means more than you know." Reading those words, I felt a rush of warmth envelop me. This journey, still unfolding between us, had become something meaningful. Sometimes, I still catch myself reminiscing about Jenna and that moment in the break room, the moment that nudged me to embrace vulnerability and break down the walls we so often put up in our lives. Our paths intertwined beautifully, weaving a friendship rooted not just in shared experiences, but in the profound honesty of our journeys. I realized then that perhaps the greatest gift you can give someone isn't just your support, but also the chance to embrace their own story alongside yours. As for my closet, it remains a mixture of memories and reminders, each piece a testament to the bonds we form when we tread gently on the paths of others, opening ourselves to understanding and connection along the way. This newfound sense of understanding hung over me like a warm blanket, enriching my days at work. I felt lighter, not just from my physical transformation, but emotionally, too. Jenna and I launched into a friendship that surprised both of us. Lunchtime became a ritual of laughter and sharing secrets, the kind of bond that offers solace amidst the mundane. I even found myself looking forward to those small, fleeting moments, a shared joke, her eyes sparkling with mischief, or the way she'd roll her eyes but crack a smile when I made a goofy remark. That's what friendship can do. It nourishes you, fills the empty spaces in your heart that you didn't even know were there. But then came the day I noticed Jenna's mood shift. It was subtle at first, like a storm brewing in the distance. She would stare at her phone during lunch, her fingers curling and uncurling as if memorizing a dance routine she was suddenly unsure of. I felt a knot tightening in my stomach, that familiar twinge of empathy reminding me how little the surface can reveal. One afternoon, as we sat surrounded by the usual office chatter, I decided, no, I needed to broach the subject. "Hey, what's going on? You've been a little off lately." I tried to sound casual, but even I could hear the concern lacing my voice. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face like the shadow of clouds passing by. "It's nothing," she said, but her eyes told a different story. I sat still, not pressing but letting the silence wrap around us, allowing her to find her own words. She hesitated, glancing down at her untouched salad. "I applied for a promotion and didn't get it. I thought I had a good chance." The vulnerability in her voice pierced through layers of practiced indifference. I remembered what it felt like to crave validation in a world that often seemed indifferent, a feeling we shared despite our stark differences. "I'm really sorry to hear that," I said softly. "I know how hard you worked for it. Just know that your talent and hard work don't go unnoticed." A small smile tugged at her lips, grateful yet fragile. As we exchanged words, the truth seeped in. Rejection had its own sting, one that could echo far beyond the workplace. Without really planning it, I felt myself bridging the gap that fear had created. "You know, I still have those clothes I was telling you about. While they aren't a magic solution, I thought maybe you'd want to try them." "They're just sitting there," I offered, hoping it wouldn't feel like pity. To my surprise, Jenna's brows furrowed, confusion coating her features. "You sure that's okay? I mean, they were yours." "Of course," I said, the conviction sweeping through me. "It would mean a lot to see them put to good use. Besides, they're like a little part of our journey here, right?" We stared at each other, a silent exchange deepening our connection even further. I saw her recognizing the hope within the gesture, the warmth of shared vulnerability transforming an old wound into something beautifully resonant. Later that week, I brought the clothes to her. When she opened the bag, eyes wide with surprise mingling with appreciation, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Each piece she tried on revealed not just fabric on skin, but also a layer of strength hidden beneath the seams of doubt. It was a miniature celebration, two friends standing tall in their stories, side by side. Jenna ended up wearing one of the old jackets the next week, my favorite one, paired with confidence that felt new yet familiar, a striking reflection of the growth we both were navigating. That day marked a turning point, not just in how we shared our journeys, but in understanding what it means to lean on each other, to give without losing a piece of yourself. Looking back now, reflecting on that chaotic but beautiful year with Jenna, I realize it's less about what we lose in life and more about what we find when we share. Each moment is a thread in the tapestry of relationships, connecting us in ways we can't always see. It has taught me that every experience, be it joyful or heartbreaking, carries the potential to interlace our lives in profound ways we can never fully understand. And as I gaze into my closet now, each piece still stands as a memory, a promise that there's always space for understanding and compassion, anchored firmly in the bond we chose to foster between us. You know how some people say your in-laws can feel like an extension of your spouse, like a package deal? Well, if that's true, I found myself stuck with a pretty hefty shipping fee. My husband, Daniel, comes from a tight-knit family that abides by a tradition they've held for generations. Every Thanksgiving, they gather at his parents' home, all 25 of them crammed in like sardines, to whip up a homemade feast, complete with a turkey so large it could probably feed a small village. I used to love this chaotic spectacle when I first joined the family, but as the years went by, it felt less like a holiday and more like a pressure cooker. This year, I was at my wit's end. I had just finished a grueling work project that left me drained, my mind buzzed incessantly, and my anxiety clawed at my chest. The thought of spending an entire day amidst so many expectations made my stomach twist in knots. So, I had what I thought was a reasonable idea: let's skip the family Thanksgiving and celebrate just the two of us, a quiet dinner at home. I felt like I was offering a breath of fresh air, like we could actually connect without the cacophony of our extended family's loud conversations and constant interruptions. But when I brought it up to Daniel, you would have thought I'd suggested we cancel Christmas. His face fell, and within seconds, the warmth in his eyes vanished. "It's tradition," he said, his voice steady but edged with disappointment, as if I were trying to rob him of an important piece of his childhood. I could feel my heart sinking with each word, and the battle within me escalated. I knew how much this meant to him, a way to feel connected to his past, to his roots, but didn't my well-being come into play too? The days dragged on as I tried to convince myself that I wasn't being selfish. My phone buzzed with messages from his family, excited invitations layered with mouth-watering food photos. "We can't wait to see you." They enthused. Meanwhile, I sat alone in my thoughts, unnerved by the fact that my choice felt like a tug-of-war in my marriage. One night, I climbed into bed feeling a mixture of guilt and fervor. "Are you seriously not going to support me in this?" I confronted him, desperately searching for understanding. "You know how stressed I am." But the conversation only spiraled, and by the time we went to sleep, we hadn't resolved anything, drifting into our restless slumber with the weight of unsaid words pressing down on us. The morning of Thanksgiving arrived, and I found myself standing in our kitchen alone, staring down at a measly chicken breast and a box of stuffing I had half-heartedly set out, a stark contrast to any festive spread. I closed my eyes, trying to summon some sense of joy, but all I could see was Daniel in his parents' living room, laughing with everyone around him, while I'd sit here, the outlier. Was it really fair of me to take that away from him? But as I reached for the phone to send a last-minute text to his family, something made me pause. What if this was my chance to define our own traditions, to take ownership of our new family? So I decided right then and there, with the scent of "why can't I cook" wafting around me, to embrace the day ahead as it came. It wouldn't be what I'd envisioned, but it would be ours. Instead of spending the day sulking, I pulled on my apron, put on some music, and danced around the kitchen as if no one was watching. When Daniel returned home later that evening, looking a bit deflated but relieved, I greeted him with a plate of warmly roasted vegetables and a smile that masked my earlier worries. "I missed you," I said softly. And in the end, I realized traditions don't have to be rigid, they could bend and shift, just like the seasons. We may have skipped the family gathering, but maybe we were crafting our own new tradition, one rooted in understanding, love, and a whole lot of experimenting in the kitchen. Who knows, perhaps next year we'd figure out a way to combine both worlds. It felt like starting fresh, just the two of us. Update: it's been a few months since the Thanksgiving. Daniel and I talked things over, and he admitted he felt pressured to uphold traditions that sometimes felt more like burdens. We now have a mutual understanding to take turns with holidays, one year at home, the next with family. And honestly, I think adapting our own tradition ignited a renewed spark in our marriage. Turns out, cooking together isn't just an activity, it's our own rite of passage. As we settled into this new rhythm, the upcoming holiday season brought with it a sense of excitement that had been absent before. I could hardly wait to turn our small apartment into a cozy haven, filled with the scent of cinnamon and the sound of soft carols drifting through the air. It was our year to celebrate together, just the two of us, and I embraced the chance wholeheartedly. I spent days researching recipes that felt both festive and a little unique, like a spiced pear tart that I thought would be a surprise hit and an adventurous twist on mashed potatoes with garlic and herbs. Daniel was on board, which was a relief. He'd offered to take care of the turkey, turning our kitchen into a blend of his family's traditional preparation and my less conventional tweaks. The night before Thanksgiving, we went grocery shopping together. Our cart filled with fresh ingredients and maybe too many snacks. We even put on our own little competition to see who could make the most ridiculous culinary choice. I ended up with a bag of enormous marshmallows that I had no idea what to do with. "We can roast them on the fire pit," Daniel laughed, tossing them into the cart. It felt like we were kids again, exploring rather than just preparing. We headed home, and as the evening wound down, I could feel the warmth of the holiday wrapping around us. The next morning, as dawn painted our kitchen in soft golden light, we turned on our favorite music and commenced the cooking marathon. I can still picture Daniel, apron slightly askew, carefully basting the turkey while I danced around with my baking dish. He had such a focused determination, and I smiled to myself, thinking how much I loved this version of him, the one who made our holiday tradition his own, just as I was shifting mine. We set the table with the care of artists preparing a masterpiece. I lined our modest dining table with a simple white tablecloth, and we adorned it with candles and a small bouquet of autumn leaves. Each detail felt like a stitch in the fabric of our new tradition. But as we filled our plates with the food we had cooked together, a part of me remained anxious. What would my family think in just a few days when they came over for dessert? Would they accept this new direction we had taken? When my family arrived later that weekend, I poured all my nervous energy into being the perfect hostess, hoping that they would see the love beneath the different setup. Thankfully, they stepped in with warm hugs and familiar laughter that made my heart swell, easing the tension I had felt brewing at the back of my mind. I could see Daniel engaging with my family, joking about the turkey and exchanging culinary tips, and for a moment, I felt a rush of relief and excitement. Yet, as dessert time approached, my mom, hopeful as ever, leaned closer to me and said, "So, next year, we'll be back to the usual, right?" The question took me off guard, and I felt my stomach drop slightly. As I glanced at Daniel, who seemed equally uncomfortable, I realized I had to say something. "Actually, Mom, Daniel and I are hoping to keep alternating traditions each year. This is a new start for us, and we'd love your support," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. There was a moment of silence, and my heart raced. I worried how my family would react, especially my mom, who cherished the comfort of our old ways. But instead, she nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression creeping onto her face. "I see, well, that's wonderful, too. Traditions can change, but family stays the same." That felt like a turning point. It was like suddenly everything felt lighter. We spent the rest of the evening sharing tales of our own childhood holiday experiences. Daniel opened up about his sometimes overwhelming family traditions, and I shared my quirky childhood dishes. The thought that hit me was how our stories were powerful bridges, perfect for building new family traditions. As I lay in bed that night, with Daniel beside me, I reflected on the day. It wasn't just about the food or the holiday, it was about how sharing our worlds led to something richer. Together, we had transformed our uncertainties into laughter and warmth in a way I never thought possible. Fast forward a few weeks, while the world outside still breathed the remnants of autumn, our little home thrummed with the spirit of our own unique traditions, one dish at a time. Daniel and I started brainstorming even more ideas for the upcoming holiday season, asking each other about childhood memories and the experiences that defined us. It felt like we had a new plotline to explore in the story of our marriage, a blend of the old and the new where love was the consistent thread. This year, instead of a simple update, it felt more like a testament. Sometimes stepping away from tradition isn't stepping away from family. It's merely a beautiful way of welcoming them along for the ride into something fresh. Together, we forged ahead, ready to keep crafting our own path with all the warmth and resilience our hearts could muster. This was not just about a holiday, it was a celebration of us, and I couldn't wait for what was to come. As the leaves turned golden and the air began to carry the crisp bite of autumn, I could feel the excitement bubbling in my chest, a mixture of anticipation and a wee bit of nervousness. It was almost time for us to host our first Thanksgiving in our new tradition, the opportunity to showcase our blend of cultures and backgrounds with our closest friends and family. Daniel and I had charted out a whole new experience, merging his family's classic recipes with my own quirks. We developed a menu that made my mouth water just thinking about it: sweet potato casserole with a dash of cinnamon and a sprinkle of maple syrup, my mother's famous stuffing enriched with a touch of sage, and of course, his family's roast turkey, but I snuck in a smoky paprika twist. The kitchen was alive with the sound of sizzling pans and laughter as we rummaged through old family cookbooks and presented dishes to each other like treasured gifts. Each spoonful of gravy, every pie crust we wrestled with, became a symbol of our partnership. I remember the way Daniel would toss his head back with laughter, a hint of flour dusting his nose every time I challenged him on the proper way to fold in the whipped cream. Those little moments became our unbreakable thread, a tapestry of memories woven with joy, frustration, and affection. As Thanksgiving approached, however, I couldn't shake a lingering anxiety about how everyone would respond. Would my parents take to his family's traditions? Would his relatives embrace the deviations from the norm? The night before the big day, I found myself lying awake, staring at the ceiling, mulling over my feelings as the weight of expectation settled upon my chest. It was more than just any family gathering, it was holding the potential for either acceptance or pushback. When the big day finally arrived, the air was thick with the smell of roasted turkey and fresh herbs, a heady mix that seemed to wrap around us like a warm embrace. Our small home was filled with love and laughter as guests trickled in, greeting each other with hugs and excited chatter. I caught momentary glances of worry on my parents' faces, but when I saw Daniel's Aunt Linda laughing heartily at a joke my dad had told, my heart eased slightly. Dinner was a beautiful disaster. Just as we all sat down to eat, the turkey, in all its glory, let loose a spray of juices, making Daniel and me erupt in giggles while our guests shot us amused glances. My mom offered a spoonful of real gravy while Daniel proudly served his paprika gravy, and I watched, holding my breath for the first bite. The moment felt electric. Much to my surprise, the two gravies aged like fine wine, drawing compliments from all corners of the table. Mixed conversations flowed over platters filled with vibrant colors, a mosaic of flavors that told stories of our families and their histories. As I watched my parents invest in Daniel's family's tales and traditions, my heart swelled. There we sat, weaving the old and the new into something that belonged to all of us, intertwined in understanding and affection rather than obligation. By the time dessert rolled around, I felt different, lighter, more alive. I looked across the table at Daniel, who caught my gaze and smiled, his eyes twinkling with a blend of pride and amusement at the embarrassing mishaps of the day. The evening ended with us all clinking our glasses, a chorus of gratitude ringing out as we celebrated not only the food but the promise of togetherness. The echo of laughter settled like a warm quilt draped over our shoulders, enfolding us in a newfound appreciation for life, each of us, together. As our guests began to leave, I joined Daniel by the door, quietly savoring the moment. It dawned on me that stepping away from rigid traditions opened doors I never knew existed. It wasn't about rejecting the past, it was about embracing possibilities, finding fresh beginnings even in the heart of cherished history. That night felt like more than just a holiday dinner, it was a collection of little miracles, each one reminding me that families can indeed forge ahead, carving paths anew while carrying legacies along for the ride. As we cleaned up together, Daniel leaned against the counter, a satisfied grin on his face. "Maybe Thanksgiving doesn't have to fit into a box," he said, brushing crumbs into the trash. "Maybe it just has to feel like home." And in that moment, surrounded by remnants of laughter and a shared future, I knew without a doubt that we were building our own journey, brick by brick, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I never thought asking my friend to bring her own food would turn into such a big deal, but here we are. You see, I live in a small studio apartment that I love dearly, but my budget is tighter than my jeans after the holidays. My friend Emma and I have known each other for years. We met in college, bonded over shared lunches in the cafeteria, her expertly crafted avocado toast against my questionable attempts at repurposing leftover pizza. We had a rhythm, you know? We'd swap meals and recipes without a second thought, but fast forward to today, and the stakes feel different. When Emma texted me last week asking to come over, I felt a surge of excitement, followed by that familiar pang of anxiety about dinner. My cupboards had become depressingly bare. An empty fridge greeted me each time I opened it, which was a stark contrast to the last few years when I had a solid stock of ingredients. I quickly realized that it wouldn't be fair to expect her to feast on my sad assortment of condiments and a wilted cucumber. So, sheepishly, I sent her a text with a suggestion. "Hey. Love to have you over. Would you mind bringing something to munch on?" As soon as I hit send, a knot twisted in my stomach. Was I being rude? I shook my head, trying to dismiss the nagging thoughts that followed. I wasn't trying to be stingy, just practical. But as the evening approached, I could feel my anxiety building. When she arrived, her expression was a mix of surprise and a hint of disappointment, and I immediately felt small. "You really asked me to bring food?" She laughed, her eyes slightly narrowed. It cut deep. "I just thought," I stammered, trying to make sense of my own reasoning, "I haven't had the chance to go grocery shopping this week." Creating a facade that everything was fine, I eached out for her usual laid-back demeanor, hoping it would lighten the mood. Instead, my home felt suddenly electric with tension. We settled on my tiny couch with a bowl of popcorn she had graciously brought. The crunches were too loud, filling the silence that stretched between us. I wanted to explain, to really convey my struggles, both financially and emotionally, but every attempt felt stunted, a half-formed thought getting lost in the noise of our moment. As we forced laughter while reminiscing about old times, I could sense that our dynamic had shifted slightly, and I wasn't sure how to mend it. After she left, I spent the rest of the night thinking about how trivial my request had been. Was I really the jerk for trying to be responsible, or had I crossed some invisible line in our friendship? Days turned into a week, and I'll admit, I was too cowardly to reach out. I thought about everything in a loop, replaying moments that I wished I had handled differently. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me, and I started drafting a post on a Reddit thread. My heart raced as the words poured out, sharing every doubt I had, every moment of joy and sorrow we'd experienced together. I anxiously awaited responses. To my surprise, the comments flooded in with empathy and understanding. "You're not an asshole, you're just being cautious," one user wrote. Their kind sentences soothed my worries a little, reminding me that I wasn't alone in navigating these awkward dynamics. A few days later, to my shock, Emma surprised me with a visit. This time, she showed up with a homemade pizza, not just any pizza, but one with toppings we used to argue about in school. We laughed until we cried over memories and bad ingredients, finally feeling like ourselves again amidst the melted cheese and gooey toppings. As we shared the meal, it occurred to me that this little hiccup wasn't a final verdict on our friendship. If anything, it opened the door for deeper honesty, that sometimes we need to be real about our situations, no matter how uncomfortable it feels. We talked it out, and it felt refreshing. I found comfort in her reassurance that there were no hard feelings. As I watched her eat, my heart softened more than I thought possible. I knew I still had a way to go with being open and vulnerable, learning to ask for help without shame, and recognizing the beauty of shared meals, no matter who brought the food. As we sat there, the warmth of the late afternoon sun spilling through my kitchen window, I couldn't help but reflect on how this little spat had shifted the ground beneath our feet. The table, now laden with an odd assortment of takeout containers and half-eaten dinners, felt transformed from a battleground into a sanctuary of sorts. As Sarah absent-mindedly picked at her fries, a mix of ketchup and ranch smeared across her plate, I felt grateful for her ability to laugh at the situation. "You know," she said between bites, "I could have easily been more upset. But in the grand scheme of things, it's just food." Her smile was genuine, but I knew there was a depth to it that hinted at her own struggles. I watched her, realizing that my discomfort had resonated with something deeper inside her as well. Maybe we both carried a little baggage that we had been hesitant to unpack. The conversation meandered from deep reflections on our friendship to lighter topics, like the hilarious antics of our mutual friends and the latest Netflix series we had been binging. With every joke, every shared look of amusement, I felt a layer of tension peel away. It was strange how vulnerability had become the unexpected glue holding our evening together, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was a pivotal moment. For once, instead of clenching my fists over my own insecurities, I was loosening the grip and allowing acceptance into the cracks. As Sarah spoke about her recent promotion at work, animatedly detailing her new responsibilities, I took a moment to absorb what lay beneath the surface. It was evident she had been pushing herself hard, like all of us do in our quest for success, attaching her worth to her achievements. I had never really seen her in that light. We often navigated through life like two ships passing in the night, seldom hovering around each other's storms. "Hey, Sarah," I ventured, needing to bring up the elephant in the room again, about our food conversation. She raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Yeah? What about it?" I hesitated, unsure if I really wanted to dip into the well of awkwardness again. But something compelled me forward. "I think it's important for both of us to feel comfortable sharing our situations with each other. I don't want you to feel like you can't come over because you're worried about food or finances. We're friends, right? We should share everything." She nodded slowly, and I could see her processing my words. "I appreciate that. Honestly, I've never thought about it like that before. I guess I assumed if I came over, I should contribute. But I would hate for either of us to feel burdened in our friendship, especially when we're just trying to be there for each other." And there it was, a booming truth echoing in my mind. In our world of social expectations, I had been clinging to the idea that self-sufficiency was the end goal, but maybe friendship was just a dance of give and take. I couldn't remember the last time we'd simply let down our guards and leaned into the beautiful chaos of sharing moments together without the need for pretense. After dinner, we decided to make the most of the evening. We wandered over to my balcony, the sunset painting the sky in a wash of oranges and pinks. We talked long into the night, our laughter mingling with the distant sounds of the city. For the first time, I felt the freedom of being wholly myself with her, unencumbered by the fear of judgment. I realized that by addressing our discomfort, we had forged a deeper connection than mere shared meals. We had unveiled the threads of honesty and support that we could weave into the fabric of our friendship. As she packed up the remaining food, I felt a lightness settling in my chest. We agreed to alternate cooking duties moving forward, a new tradition starting that night. I knew there would be challenges ahead. There would be more meals shared and, inevitably, more awkward conversations. But for the first time, it didn't feel like a daunting task. It felt like an invitation to grow. Life is messy, friendships are complex, and sometimes the most beautiful moments emerge from the chaos. And surprisingly, I found myself looking forward to what lay ahead, a journey built on authenticity, laughter, and perhaps, a shared plate of cold fries. As I watched her meticulously dissect the lasagna I had prepared, grateful but honest about its slightly undercooked noodles, I realized how essential these moments of vulnerability were. Our conversations meandered from the food we were sharing to the deeper questions nestled in our lives, dreams, fears, and hopes for the future. I learned that she had been feeling overwhelmed at work, juggling deadlines like a circus performer. With flaming torches. "Sometimes I just want to quit," she admitted between bites, her voice small as if admitting defeat. I could see the stress etched on her face, the corners of her mouth twitching downwards, and it stirred something deep inside me. We exchanged reassurances, her struggles reminded me of my own, and perhaps that was why I felt compelled to invite her in the first place. The sound of forks clinking against plates filled the quiet space between us, creating a rhythm that felt comforting, like the pulse of a warm heartbeat. I offered her a second slice, and she graciously accepted, saying something about needing all the sustenance she could get. As she dug in with genuine appreciation, I felt a sense of connection bloom, vibrant and alive between us. It was a revelation, right there, amidst the backdrop of my cozy, albeit cluttered kitchen. I discovered that sharing wasn't solely about the food. It was about the act of carving out time for each other, to savor not just the flavors but the stories that came with them. When the dishes were finally cleared away, we sat together on my couch, her laughter dancing like sunlight in the room, chasing away the shadows that had lingered too long in both our hearts. There was something ineffable about that evening. It felt like we had pierced through a veil of pretense, revealing the raw fabric of our friendship. I assured her we'd tackle the cooking duties equally, promising to bring my best every time, except for the cold fries incident. We both chuckled at that one. In the days that followed, there were more meal preparations, more invitations extended, and they were filled with the same laughter and vulnerability. We had created this little sanctuary of openness where the awkwardness of our past discussions had transformed into playful banter, a dance of sharing rather than a struggle. My heart felt buoyant as I navigated through these moments, slowly shedding the layers that had covered me like an unwieldy blanket. I began to realize that friendships are indeed a living, breathing thing. They require nourishment, like the meals we prepared together. As we took turns hosting, sometimes we cooked, other times we ordered in, and occasionally we compromised with a bowl of cereal and mismatched utensils. Each gathering cemented our bond further. Gradually, I learned to voice my feelings without fear, sharing my insecurities, my worries, and yes, even my cravings. There was something beautifully symbiotic about this arrangement, creating space for both of us to express our needs honestly. One evening, as we sat surrounded by half-empty pizza boxes and laughter spilling into the corners of my living room, I caught a glimpse of the journey we had traveled. The small discomfort of that first conversation felt like a stepping stone leading us into territory rich with understanding and connection. I realize now that our friendship isn't just about bringing food, it's about bringing ourselves into the open, flaws and all. As warm memories threaded together with laughter and late-night heart-to-hearts, I couldn't help but feel grateful for the bumps along the road. They had carved out this rhythm of authenticity in my life, reminding me that vulnerability isn't something to be feared, it's a bridge connecting us to one another in this beautifully messy thing we call life. And as I glanced over at her, her laughter mingling with the soft glow of the evening light, I felt a peace settle in. We had turned a once uncomfortable moment into a source of joy, building a deeper friendship around the table of shared experiences. This was not the end, but just the beginning of many meals to come. I still remember the excitement I felt leading up to my 30th birthday party. It wasn't just another year, it felt like a milestone, a moment to cherish, surrounded by friends and laughter. I planned everything meticulously. The decorations were vibrant, the food was catered from my favorite local eatery, and I'd even hired a small band to play some live music. My close friends were excited, and I could hardly contain my joy. But then came the day, and everything turned upside down when Sarah, my longtime friend, the one I thought would be there by my side, arrived with her squawking 1-year-old in tow. I could hardly believe my eyes. As I wrapped my arms around her for a hug, I noticed the baby, a tiny creature with bright eyes and a loud wail, clinging to her. "Hey, I couldn't find a babysitter last minute," she said with an apologetic smile. I'd always been supportive of my friends and their parenting struggles, but there was a time and a place, this wasn't it. As the evening wore on, the baby cried incessantly, punctuating the lively music with screams that made small talk nearly impossible. I felt my heart sinking. My friends were dodging the noise, trying their best to focus on conversations, but I could see the cliques breaking apart, the laughter dwindling. It was devastating to watch something that I'd meticulously crafted slowly deteriorate into chaos. I'd waited so long for a night of celebration, and now, all I could think about was how to salvage the joy. After a while, I found Sarah alone in the kitchen, the baby resting uncharacteristically quiet in her arms. I could see it in her eyes, she was tired, and I knew the stress of this situation weighed heavily on her. But I thought about all my friends gathered in my living room, their faces strained in an effort to connect amid the wreckage of the birthday festivities. So, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to say. "Sarah," I started, my voice low and shaky, "I really appreciate you coming, but it's tough for everyone with the baby here. Do you think you could?" I trailed off, unsure how to finish. I saw thoughts racing across Sarah's face, hurt, understanding, and then a kind of acceptance tinged with sorrow. "You want me to leave?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "It's my birthday, and I just wanted a fun night with everyone," I replied, my heart aching. In that moment, I felt like the villain of my own story. Asking her to leave felt selfish, but staying meant sacrificing my happiness, and potentially everyone else's. With a sad smile, she nodded, understanding the difficult position I was in. "I'll go." "I'm sorry," she murmured. As I watched her gather her things and slip away into the night, I felt a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Relief washed over me, mixed with guilt that left a heavy stone sitting in my gut. I couldn't believe I'd asked a friend to leave, but the party resumed after her exit. The music felt lighter, the laughter returned, but in the quiet moments, I kept reflecting on what had just happened. Was I truly the asshole for wanting a night free of distractions? I spent days questioning my choice and wondering if I'd made the right decision. It felt wrong to sacrifice the joy of my celebration for what felt like a moment of parental struggle. Eventually, I reached out to Sarah, uncertain and nervous, but I knew I needed closure. To my surprise, she responded with grace, assuring me that I wasn't a bad friend. She understood. We talked, and she shared the exhaustion and difficulty of being a new parent, how hard it was to navigate friendships that once felt easy. As we worked through the emotions, our bond deepened, and I realized that sometimes, in friendships, things get messy, and it's okay to feel conflicted. It didn't totally erase my guilt, but knowing she understood made it a little bit lighter. That birthday became a lesson wrapped in a celebration, the importance of communication, understanding, and the love that binds us, even when situations get messy. As the night wore on, the air around us thick with balloons and the scent of cake, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed since the prior awkward moments. Laughter floated through the room like a warm blanket, reminding me of the joy we had all gathered to share. My friends were unwaveringly supportive, sipping their drinks and sharing stories, and it felt like the chaotic energy from earlier had melted into something more comfortable. Everyone had rallied to lift my spirits after that initial frustration, and in that moment, I began to feel celebratory again. But it didn't just stop there. My conversation with Sarah had opened my eyes to her world. I watched as she lovingly cradled her baby, who had finally quieted down, his little head resting against her shoulder. The sight brought a new wave of understanding. I had never completely grasped the challenges she faced as a new mother, the weight of responsibility mixed with exhaustion. As we spoke deeper into the night, she shared anecdotes from those first few months, the frightening sleepless nights, the endless worries, the whirlwind of love and confusion that came with a tiny human being entirely dependent on her. I found it fascinating, the way she navigated her life now so differently than before, and while my birthday was supposed to be about me, it had quickly become a channel for both of us to process our feelings, her about the struggles of new parenthood, me about feeling selfish for wanting the party to be a carefree escape. In those moments of raw honesty, I could sense our friendship evolve. It wasn't just me and Sarah from college trying to cling to the past. We were two adults carving out a new understanding of each other, moving forward even if our paths didn't look the same anymore. We laughed, cried, and even joked about how I could have set up a designated baby zone at my party, something I wouldn't have imagined saying just a few hours earlier. It felt refreshing to let go of the guilt that had been chasing me since that afternoon. I didn't know how to balance all these conflicting feelings, but talking it out with her made it feel less like a burden. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, and my friends began to trickle out with dollops of cake in hand, I felt a soft weight settle in my chest. It was a bittersweet mix of joy and melancholy. While the party was winding down, I also realized that this night had given birth to an unexpected clarity. I wrapped my arms around Sarah, and she melted into the hug like we'd done so many times before in our carefree youth. Instead of the usual light-hearted farewells, I whispered how grateful I was for her, and she echoed the sentiment. I could see it in her eyes. She was still the same friend I'd known, just now with layers, stories, and scars that I hadn't understood before. Later that night, after everyone had trickled away, I sat alone at the remnants of my birthday party, an untouched piece of cake still glaring at me from the table. I realized how this new chapter was more than just me getting older. It was about understanding that friendships ebb and flow with the seasons of life. We might not be able to hang out like we used to or do spontaneous fun things, but what we could do was find new bonds in the changes, in the complexities. It definitely wouldn't be smooth sailing, but after tonight, I felt excited to navigate it all together, kinks and all. This birthday, marked by its chaos, had gifted me the insight that sometimes what we need most is to listen, to empathize, and to embrace the messiness. Isn't that what growing up is about? As I fell asleep that night, visions of laughter and quiet conversations danced through my mind, weaving a tapestry that felt more profound than any single celebration could encapsulate. The days following the party carried a kind of buoyant energy, a strange mix of nostalgia and hope that wrapped around me like a favorite sweater. I found myself reaching out more frequently to Mia, now not just because of obligation, but out of genuine interest in her experiences as a new mom. Our conversations began to evolve. We'd swap horror stories about sleepless nights smeared with moments of joy that made the chaos feel almost poetic. I realized I'd never fully appreciated how much love and sheer determination went into being a parent until Mia shared her day-to-day reality, painting the mundane and the profound with the same brush. It was beautiful in its honest messiness, just like the night of my birthday. One rainy Thursday, as the sky poured like it was trying to wash the world clean, Mia stopped by for coffee. The heavy scent of freshly brewed espresso filled my small apartment as we nestled into the couch, her with her favorite throw blanket draped over her shoulders, me with a comfy sweatshirt and an eagerness that buzzed in the air around us. We laughed at an embarrassing story I shared about my awkward teenage years, and I could see her eyes light up as she ventured into her own past indignities. It felt like we were reclaiming some of the uncomplicated joys we'd shared before parenthood had stepped in to complicate things. But just when I thought the moment was blissfully drifting toward nostalgia, her phone erupted into a symphony of cries and vibrations. She looked apologetic as she fumbled for the device, and in that instant, it hit me just how much her life had changed. I could see the toll it took, the way her smile faltered for just a moment, like she was being pulled back into a world of responsibilities and sleepless nights. She answered the call, and I listened softly as the familiar sounds of a cooing baby interspersed with honking cars drifted from her phone. Often, I'd tried to imagine where our friendship would go, how the kids would be a part of it, or how midnight calls would intersect with a new reality. But in that instant, seeing her navigate motherhood while holding on to our friendship, it felt like we were carving a new path together, one where complexities were acknowledged but not allowed to choke the bond we had. Post-call, Mia looked exhausted but refreshed, a paradox I was getting used to witnessing. "Sorry, it was my mom. She's picking up dinner so I can actually enjoy a night off," she explained, her voice lightening. I teased her about how she wasn't taking me out for dinner, and she laughed openly, the hearty sound pouring warmth through the room. As the evening rolled on, we settled into a comforting rhythm of conversation that breathed life back into our friendship. There was an unspoken agreement, to meet somewhere in the middle where kids and adult lives could merge without erasing who we once were. Our talks shifted between dreams for the future, both personal and professional, and sometimes we would pause, reflecting on the rather surprising detour our lives had taken. Each shared moment fortified our connection, and I found myself increasingly grateful for the present, for what we were building. Nights like these became the norm. A cozy dinner here, an impromptu playdate there, each hangout reinforced the idea that friendship was about adaptability. Mia's son came to frequent our get-togethers, and he'd inevitably end up stealing the show, his giggles filling the gaps of our sometimes serious adult conversations. While there were still moments of overwhelming chaos, and I admit, there were times when I found myself longing for those carefree days without baby talk and nap schedules, I often felt a new richness in the friendship that was slowly blossoming. As time passed, those tidbits of laughter echoed in my home, changing what I thought was needed to celebrate life's milestones. I came to embrace the idea that growth doesn't come from shying away from challenges but rather from embracing them fully. Each new layer added depth to our friendship, reminding me how still water runs deep. There was a moment, weeks after the party and our newfound understanding, when I had a creeping thought of guilt rise back up. Had it all been worth it? The struggles felt real and convoluted. But on a sunny afternoon with a gentle breeze wafting through my windows, as Mia's son giggled and reached for a crayon, painting the world with bright strokes, I felt an overwhelming wash of certainty. I was so glad I'd navigated this journey with her. Friendships may bend, but they don't break, they just find new shapes, new stories to tell. As I looked at Mia, her laughter and genuine happiness spilling over, I realized I wouldn't trade this journey for anything. I never thought I'd be the one to put my foot down in our friend group, but here I am, standing on a precipice of sorts, caught between loyalty and discomfort. I'm Sarah, and I've been friends with Mike, Jess, and Clara for over a decade, since our awkward high school days. We've shared everything from triumphs to heartbreaks, always finding solace in each other's company, until house rules turned the company into a battlefield. It all started when we began hanging out at Mike's place more frequently. At first, it felt like an extension of our usual get-togethers, filled with laughter and shared snacks. But then, as the weeks turned to months, I started noticing little things: the strict silence during movie nights unless you had a comment worthy of praise, the way he would glance at his watch if someone went over their allowed time in the bathroom, and the unsolicited critique of how my coffee preference was too frivolous for an adult. It bugged me more than I wanted to admit, but I convinced myself it was just his quirk, something we could laugh about later. However, as the restrictions mounted, no arguing over board games, no using your phone unless it was for him, I began to see the cracks in our camaraderie. Jess and Clara were as uncomfortable as I was. I remember one night, sitting on the sagging couch, the air thick with tension as Mike launched into another diatribe about etiquette, and I felt my heart racing. After a particularly stifling evening, I brought it up to the group. "Do you think we should say something?" I asked, my voice carrying a hint of hesitance. Clara chewed her lip, glancing at Jess, who nodded slowly. We weren't mad at Mike for being himself, we just didn't want to live under a magnifying glass that forced us to tiptoe through every gathering. That's when I suggested we take a break from his house, for our own sanity, really. It's not about excluding him, it's about preserving what we've built together, I argued. They agreed, albeit hesitantly, and we decided to meet at Jess's place instead. The first time we did it, there was a relief that washed over us like an unexpected breeze. We chatted freely, erupted in laughter without checking the clock, and the pulse of our friendship returned. But, of course, Mike found out. I still remember the way his face twisted when he confronted me, hurt spilling out of his eyes like an open wound. "So, you don't want to hang out at my place anymore?" he asked incredulously, and I felt the guilt creep in. "It's not that, it's just..." I stumbled, realizing how fragile friendships can be. Our conversations became a series of circular debates after that, like two opposing trains on the same track. I didn't want to hurt him but felt compelled to stand my ground. Over the weeks that followed, the group dynamic shifted. While Jess and Clara enjoyed the newfound freedom, I found myself stuck in a loop of guilt and worry. What if we ended up pushing him away entirely? That thought haunted me, casting a shadow over our fun times. We tried inviting him to join us, but he'd show up with an attitude. It was just off. Little jabs, remarks about our advanced carefree spirit, and things that made it clear he was petulant over our decision. I wanted to talk him into understanding that it wasn't about him, it was about the environment. Yet, every time I opened my mouth, words felt inadequate. The tension simmered like a pot on the verge of boiling over. Some nights, lying in bed, I thought about how friendships evolve. I wondered if I had crossed a line, whether I truly was the asshole. In my heart, I wanted to say no. I believed compromise is part of any relationship, but I never had the guts to confront Mike again, fearing it would unravel the fragile thread holding us together. Looking back now, I realize it took months of distance for us to finally communicate properly. We met up again for coffee, at a neutral spot because the house rule debates just got way too heavy, but this time, the walls were down. We could finally talk about how our friendship had changed without the pressure of the rigid rules. There was still hurt, okay, a lot of hurt, but also a willingness to listen. We discussed boundaries, about what felt comfortable, and, strangely enough, Mike confessed how much he feared being left out. Somehow, through all the misunderstandings, we found common ground. It's a messy process, friendships, but I think we're on the way back to being whole again, or at least learning how to navigate this new chapter together. One thing's for sure, though, I'd never advocate for ghosting a friend over house rules again. As I sit here reflecting on all that's happened, the weight of that weekend is still with me, heavy yet oddly uplifting. I thought letting go of the rigid house rules would lead us to a happier place, but seeing how it unraveled initially had me questioning my instincts. The truth is, Mike's home had always been our sanctuary, a gathering spot where laughter echoed late into the night. But it was also a space where unspoken tension lingered, hovering above us like a dark cloud just waiting to rain. When I encouraged the group to rethink our visits, stating that the rules about food and drinks, even how we talked around certain topics, were stifling, I felt more like a provocateur than a friend trying to protect our dynamic. When we finally confronted Mike together, it felt like peeling back layers we'd been adding to ourselves over the years. Words flowed as we sat in the living room, the familiar walls lined with photos of memories that now felt tainted by our recent rifts. I watched as Mike's face shifted from hurt to confusion and then slowly to realization. I could see that we weren't just addressing rules, we were unpacking insecurities and meticulously wrapping each other in empathy. The feeling of isolation I'd sensed in him, an atmosphere thick enough to choke on, dissolved into light when he shared that he feared being left out, that he'd built those rules as a safeguard but had instead trapped himself in us. When we spoke about boundaries, I felt a sense of catharsis. It was remarkably humbling to see Mike's vulnerability wash over him like a tide, and I reflected on how often I'd felt the same dread of being uninvited or merely ignored. There was a rawness to those conversations that left us breathless, yet relieved in an odd way, like a storm finally clearing. One by one, we shared our own burdens, the little things that built up over time, creating resentment. A sense of understanding formed between us, like an invisible bond tightening with each confession. By the end of our heart-to-heart, we dismantled the fear-based structure of our friendship to make room for something more authentic. Though there was still a long way to go, hurts can be stubborn like weeds in a garden, we promised to work through them together, to navigate this way forward like a group of explorers hunting for new paths in familiar woods. I might not have all the answers, but one thing became abundantly clear: I didn't want to lose our connection over something so fundamental as house rules, which, when you peel back the layers, stemmed from fears both spoken and unspoken. As I look back now, I feel relieved that we could transform dysfunction into an opportunity for deeper bonds. It reminded me that friendships are messy, yes, but they're ours to cultivate. I learned that conversation is the best fertilizer we could provide, nurturing dialogue until we were finally comfortable sitting together in silence again, knowing we'd chosen each other, rules or no rules. Life has a way of teaching lessons when you least expect it. Beyond the surface issues, we unearth deeper truths about ourselves and one another that I think will keep us anchored through whatever storms lie ahead. As I look back now, I feel relieved that we could transform dysfunction into an opportunity for deeper bonds. It reminded me that friendships are messy, yes, but they're ours to cultivate. I learned that conversation is the best fertilizer we could provide, nurturing dialogue until we were finally comfortable sitting together in silence again, knowing we'd chosen each other, rules or no rules. Life has a way of teaching lessons when you least expect it. Beyond the surface issues, we unearth deeper truths about ourselves and one another that I think will keep us anchored through whatever storms lie ahead. One evening, as we gathered at the park, the sun dipping low behind the trees, casting golden rays over our small assembly of blankets and snacks, I could hear their laughter, a sound that had felt distant for so long. There was a lightness in the air, a tangible ease, and for a moment, I let myself be fully present, breathing it all in. As we passed around a shared bowl of popcorn, Mike looked around and broke the comfortable silence. "You know," he said, tossing a kernel into his mouth, "I had this idea that all of you were ganging up on me when you started coming over less often. I thought I was the nuisance." His laughter was half-hearted, but it kicked off a cascading effect, each of us nodding along as we revealed our own misunderstandings, our own doubts that had turned into insecurities. It turned into a revelation, a realization that we were all human, each guarding things that shouldn't be bottled up. I remember feeling a swell of gratitude wash over me, realizing that this group could survive the rough patches, that we could be honest without fear of judgment. It felt oddly cathartic, acknowledging those feelings rather than letting them fester. Then Christine, who had been mostly quiet, chimed in with a shaky but determined voice. "We've all felt anxious about something, haven't we? Whether it's about being too clingy, or feeling like we don't belong." The honesty hung in the air, a unifying thread that wove us closer. I saw lighter sparks in their eyes, each of us willing to step outside our comfort zones for the sake of our friendship. I felt lighter too. Maybe this was how growth looked, sometimes jagged, sometimes beautiful. The next week, we organized a board game night, a perfect excuse to hang out without the shadows of rules hanging overhead. We laughed, we argued over game pieces, and at one point, Mike playfully accused me of cheating, but instead of letting it spiral into an argument, I laughed it off. "Okay, guilty as charged." Then we both burst into laughter, and it felt like every uncomfortable moment from the previous weeks had burned away, just smoke dissipating into the night sky. I packed my things to leave that evening, and as we said our goodbyes, I felt a genuine warmth. We shared a group hug, an unspoken agreement that we'd keep fighting for this thing we had, however imperfect. I hoped we'd learned to communicate enough that no one felt left out or diminished again. As I walked back home, under a blanket of stars, I smiled at the thought of what we'd built, a bridge over a tumultuous river instead of letting it swallow us whole. Life might throw more storms our way, but now at least, we had boats together. I resolved to never forget that conversation is magic, and in a world where people often ghost each other over differences, we chose connection instead. As I settled into bed that night, I felt something bittersweet creeping in, an acknowledgement that while we had made progress, we were still a work in progress ourselves. But maybe that was okay, too. We'd navigate this new chapter together, collected not as perfect friends but as imperfect allies in this life, and I was more grateful than ever to be on this journey with them. It was a standard Friday night at our house, and the air was thick with the smell of freshly baked brownies and popcorn that I had just finished tossing in the air fryer. As the matriarch of my family and an ever-dedicated team mom for my daughter's softball squad, I thought I was hitting all the right notes. We had a sleepover planned for the girls after practice, a popular tradition that usually saw kids raiding our pantry for snacks until someone inevitably flops into a sugar coma. I had decided to swing for the fences this time, metaphorically speaking, with a spread that I thought would resonate: chips, soda, candy, you name it, everything I deemed fun and sleepover worthy. But as the girls poured in, all giggles and energy, my heart sank a little when I caught sight of one of the other moms standing by the snack table with a look of horror etched across her face. "Oh wow, I didn't think we were having a junk food party," she quipped with a tight smile, and it felt like the air had stopped circulating for a moment. You see, this particular mom, Lisa, prided herself on health. She lectured everyone during meetings about nutrition and how vital it was for our children, especially athletes, to have the right fuel. My mind started racing. Was I actually doing something wrong? The girls, oblivious to the tension brewing, dug into the snacks with glee, but I felt undeniably uneasy. I recalled when I was a kid, and sleepovers were a chaotic mix of soda and treats, with laughter drowned out only by the sound of a completely exhausted mom trying to keep the volume down. So why did it feel different now, like I was some villain for wanting my daughter to just enjoy the simplicity of junk food at a sleepover? As Lisa continued to sip on her herbal tea and lecture the other moms who didn't seem too worried, my anxiety turned into a defensive flare-up, and I could feel myself brimming with irritation. I finally blurted out something like, "It's just one night, and they deserve to have fun." But instantly regretted it when Lisa gave me that classic "I'm disappointed" look. The girls continued munching away, but I, unfortunately, was caught in a spiral of doubt, wondering if maybe I had put the ultimate parental foot wrong by not adhering to a strict playbook of health guidelines that I never signed up for. The tension in the air grew, and as the night wore on, I kept picturing the conversations that were taking place behind my back. Would they question if I was a good mom for allowing this? Did they think I didn't care about their health? As the girls shouted for comedies in the living room, my heart softened thinking about the laughter I had intended to cultivate with my choices. Moments passed, and they were bouncing off walls, connecting in joy. It ignited a flicker of comfort in my chest, until out of the blue, one of the girls, Emma, threw up after a particularly spirited burst of sugary energy. Chaos erupted. Lisa whipped around dramatically as if I were solely responsible for this culinary catastrophe, which only fueled the anxiety swirling within me. As I cleaned up the mess with 1,000 apologies spilling from my lips, I caught a glimpse of the other mother's stifling laughter, and I realized that my fears of being judged might have been blown way out of proportion. I discovered that Lisa's health obsession didn't resonate with a lot of the other moms who craved a little levity amidst the grind of competitive youth sports. By the end of the night, even Lisa was helping me, albeit reluctantly, while still casting judgmental glances, and I found solace in my daughters hugging me tightly. "That was fun, Mom," she said, and in that moment, I realized something vital. Parenting doesn't come with a defined manual, and sometimes you just need to let kids be kids, even if it means extra junk on a special night. I went to bed that night reflecting on how our choices shape our children's memories, and I fell asleep wondering if Lisa's comments would still sting in the morning. In the weeks that followed, I did have conversations with other parents that highlighted varying opinions about nutrition and fun, and while a few still sided with Lisa, many came to my defense, sharing that they, too, remember the sheer joy of junk food and chaos from their own childhoods. I found a cool balance moving forward, incorporating a mix of healthier snacks into the mix while preserving those nostalgic treats, and reminded myself that while we all want the best for our kids, fun and freedom have their own essential place in growing up. Maybe in the grand scheme of things, there's more than one way to be a good mom, one that includes a little more love and a little less judgment. Reflecting on that night, I felt an array of emotions swirling inside me, a blend of relief and residual tension that lingered long after the sleepover chaos had faded. The laughter and the smell of popcorn had long been replaced by the soft hush of the night, but the lingering whispers of doubt still echoed in my mind. Sure, I'd found a way to balance the snacks, but a part of me wondered if I had truly won any battle. Why was I so shaken by Lisa's opinion? I prided myself on being a laid-back mom, one who encouraged fun and creativity, yet here I was, caught up in a whirlwind of guilt over a plate piled high with nachos and gummy bears. Later that week, as I drove the girls to practice, I noticed something in the rearview mirror. My daughter Amelia, perched in the back seat with her friends, was laughing uncontrollably over some inside joke, her face lit up like a Christmas tree. That simple joy made my heart swell. In that moment, I realized I was the architect of those giggly memories. I had chosen to let them have that vibrant night, embracing the wild spirit of childhood. Yet, I couldn't help but glance up at the school in front of me, wondering if tomorrow it would be a soft reminder of Lisa's judgment or a celebration of my commitment to being a good mother. One evening, while sorting through Amelia's backpack, I stumbled upon a handwritten note. It was a small, folded piece of paper, and my curiosity pricked at me. I opened it, and there in her familiar scrawl was a thank you note that made my heart ache with sweetness. Thank you for the best sleepover ever, Mom. You let me have fun and brought smiles to my friends' faces. In that moment, everything came rushing back, the messy fun, the laughter, the absurdity of our midnight snack creations. My heart tightened, a wave of gratitude washed over me, reminding me how becoming a mother had transformed my perspective. As the weeks rolled on, something remarkable happened. I began embracing the idea that nurturing wasn't always about strictness, that it could coexist with silliness, an epiphany that settled comfortably in my mind. The days became a warm embrace of mixed snacks, Saturday movie marathons, and occasional baking soirees where the only rule was if it doesn't look good, it still tastes amazing. It's funny how a sleepover, and all the drama that came with it, could circle back into something nourishing, filling the gaps with laughter rather than tracking rules. With time, I learned to tune out Lisa's opinions and forge my own version of motherhood, one where every smile my daughter wore was worth its weight in sugar. I'd texted Lisa a few times since then, bridging our conversation with casual updates about practice and games, and while she remained polite, the tension between us lingered like an awkward dance. Sometimes, though, I still questioned if I was being too lenient or allowing too much chaos, yet I realized a little chaotic fun, even in the form of junk food, was a gift I was proud to give. On a Sunday afternoon, I brought out the rainbow sprinkles and ice cream, throwing an impromptu ice cream social for Amelia and her friends. They squealed with delight as the ice cream dripped and the sprinkles cascaded over piled high cones. Each burst of laughter felt like a gentle reminder, every day doesn't need to fit into a mold, every meal doesn't need to be perfect. Instead, I learned to celebrate this wild, messy, beautiful phase called childhood, where chaos had its rightful place alongside lessons of moderation. So, was I really the asshole for that sleepover? Maybe a little for being too concerned about the opinions of others, but not for letting my daughter revel in a night of joy. In the grand picture of life, it turned out that love, laughter, and a little sprinkle of chaos were all essential ingredients in crafting lasting memories. As I watched Amelia laugh and play with her friends, effortlessly lost in their bubble of happiness, I knew I was okay with all the contradictions and complexities of parenthood. At the end of the day, I was simply doing my best, and that felt perfect enough. As I settled into the comfortable chaos of our living room, a wave of relief washed over me. The night had transformed from a battlefield of expectations into a tapestry woven with laughter, illuminated by the sporadic bursts of giggles that echoed against the walls, clashing against my doubts like fireworks in the night sky. I sat back on the couch, an oversized bowl of popcorn nestled on my lap, my heart swelling as I observed Amelia and her friends sprawled out across the floor, their individual quirks forming a beautiful mosaic of childhood. I baked those brownies with chunks of chocolate that probably had more sugar than cocoa. They'd turned out to be a hit, their sweet scent melding with the salty popcorn and cheesy nachos that we all started burying ourselves in. Yet, there was still that niggling thought, that seed of insecurity stemming from my conversation with Lisa. Did I really go too far in choosing the menu for the sleepover? Were my intentions, initially pure and joyful, overshadowed by my worry of not fitting the mold of what a responsible mom should be? I wanted to be an influential figure in their lives, an anchor they could return to, but here I was, casting aside the boundary of moderation in this one small area. As much as I prayed my daughter wouldn't be consumed by the judgments of others, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd somehow let her down by embracing the fun side of food instead of becoming the health-conscious mom. But then I looked again. The sight before me, a pile of pillows and blankets, laughter spilling into every corner, was a reminder of the freedom I'd wanted for her. Each girl had a slice of pizza in one hand and a brownie in the other, cheeks smeared with splotches of melted chocolate. Their bond over those treats felt sacred, a moment stolen from the everyday obligations of being children. I recalled my own sleepovers filled with late-night snacks and whispered secrets, how those nights had cajoled the stars out of me, age-old friendships cemented over laughter and late-night debates about which boy band was the best. "Can we have a dance party next?" Amelia suggested, lighting up with that uncontainable energy only youth can possess. The girls erupted into an agreement, and they jumped to their feet like a pack of puppies. I laughed. A dance party wasn't exactly part of the itinerary. But then, what's an itinerary when you're young and alive? As the music started blaring from the speaker, I got up to join them, hesitant at first, but willing to let the rhythm sweep me into their world. I swung my arms, letting go of any remaining self-consciousness while they twirled around me, losing themselves to the beat. For a brief moment, I was that age again, slipping into the simplicity of life without the weight of judgment. The laughter morphed into a chorus of delight, and in that dance, I felt the gentle reminder that while structure is essential, spontaneity breathes life into our existence. Just then, my phone buzzed, and it was a text from Lisa. "Hey, I've been thinking about what you said and I wanted to apologize for being judgmental. You're doing great, and maybe I have some things to work on too." A warmth spread through me. Maybe my heart wasn't racing as much from my worries tonight. Maybe, just maybe, in this complex world, we were all navigating something wholly imperfect together. As I hit reply, I felt resolute. "Thank you, Lisa. We all have our style. Let's collaborate on the next sleepover." The night wore on, a gentle spiral into laughter and camaraderie. As the girls eventually flopped down onto sleeping bags, sleepy-eyed and full of sugar, I knew that in that moment, I'd created a safe space for them to breathe, to thrive. I slipped into my own refuge of reflection, accepting that I was not just a mom who fed her kids junk food but a creator of memories, a guardian of joy. Behind the cozy chaos, love had poured in, filling every corner. And in that messy, beautiful night, I learned once more that sometimes being the best parent means letting go of the whole right and wrong approach, simply allowing love, laughter, and a sprinkle of fun to lead the way. You're never quite prepared for the moment when a friendship you thought was solid begins to crack, like the sudden appearance of a hairline fracture in a beloved piece of pottery. I always thought my best friend, Jessica, and I were inseparable. We met in college, bonding over late-night study sessions and shared cravings for pizza, and over the years, our friendship deepened through heartbreaks and triumphant job hunts. So, when she announced her engagement, I was ecstatic. The proposal story was adorable and included a classic movie moment. He got down on one knee at their favorite park, a sunset painting the sky behind them. But there was a twist, one I didn't see coming. She made a whole bridal party, picking 3 other friends as bridesmaids while leaving me out. My heart sank not just because I was omitted, but because there was no explanation, no discussion. It felt like a silent verdict on our friendship, sudden and devastating. In those first few weeks after her announcement, I threw myself into my job, burying myself in reports and deadlines, but still, her wedding was all anyone could talk about. Soon, it felt like the walls were closing in, everyone's excitement amplifying my hurt. When the invitations were sent out, and I received mine, just as a regular guest, it all hit me again. "Are you going to help me?" she asked one evening, her voice hopeful and bright. She needed help with planning, with organizing details, and with the emotional upheaval that comes with wedding preparations. A million thoughts surged through me, but all I managed was a restrained nod, feigning enthusiasm. Inside, though, a storm raged. I was angry at Jessica for not including me, but even more at myself for being so sensitive. She was still my best friend, right? I wrestled with the decision, tossing and turning at night, replaying our memories, trying to convince myself the exclusion didn't matter. But when I finally made the call, I felt as if I was stepping onto a tightrope. "Jess, I need to be honest," I told her, my voice trembling slightly. "I don't think I can help you with this." The silence that followed felt monumental, like I had just detonated a small bomb in the middle of our relationship. "Why?" she asked, confusion and hurt lacing her voice. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to articulate the ache I'd felt since becoming just a guest. "You didn't make me a bridesmaid. I honestly feel sidelined, like I'm not as important to you as I thought." There was a moment of silence that stretched on eternally. I briefly wondered if I should take it back, maybe promise to help anyway, but I needed her to understand why this hurt. There was probably a good reason, maybe she thought me too busy or too far away. But instead, it felt like rejection, and I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. Jessica's reply was a mixture of shock and disappointment, and in that moment, I saw the big gap forming between us, a chasm of unspoken words. "I didn't mean it like that," she whispered, and I felt the pain in her voice matching my own. "I just didn't think you'd want to." Those were the words that stung. They insinuated that maybe our friendship had been one-sided, or that I had become just a footnote in her new life narrative. Our conversation spiraled into arguments, silence, then tears. We avoided each other for days, walls closing in even more until they felt like a suffocating box. I had to confront my own insecurities. Was I being petty? A part of me wanted to reach out again, to apologize, but I wasn't sure I could stand being in a situation that made me feel so small. Eventually, while I wrestled with my thoughts, I received a text from Jessica. "I'm sorry for everything. Can we talk?" It was an olive branch, but I hesitated, caught between pride and the desperate wish to salvage our friendship. As I prepared for the conversation, I realized this wasn't just about a wedding or the title of bridesmaid. It was about clarity, about understanding our bond and figuring out where we stood now. In my heart, I wanted to believe that even if our friendship looked different, it wouldn't have to vanish. Time would tell where that conversation would lead us, but for now, I felt strangely hopeful that perhaps our friendship could bend without breaking. Life isn't always about titles and roles, sometimes, it's about navigating the gray areas together. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over everything as I watched the shadows stretch across the yard. Wedding preparation was in full swing at Emily's house, her younger sister and some of their closest friends buzzing around like bees. I took a moment to breathe, the sweet scent of blooming flowers blending with the anxiety swirling in my stomach. I'd spent nights imagining what this talk would entail, rehearsing potential angles and arguments in my head, but none of that seemed to matter the moment I stepped into the realm of reality. My best friend, the one I'd laughed with through countless late-night chats, the one I turned to during heartbreaks and victories alike, was standing before me, ideally the happiest bride-to-be. Yet there was a strange awkwardness between us. It felt like a vast canyon separating two cliffs, the old emotions reeling and clashing with the unresolved tension of our situation. "Hey, can we talk for a minute?" I ventured, my voice caught somewhere between a plea and a whisper of uncertainty. Emily turned, her expression shifting from exuberant joy to cautious curiosity. There was a flicker of concern in her brown eyes, but, thankfully, no defensiveness. I watched as she nodded, leading me into a quieter corner of the yard where the sounds of chatter faded to muffled echoes. "Is everything okay?" she asked, a hint of worry creeping into her tone. I hesitated for a moment, searching for the right way to phrase my thoughts. "I just wanted to tell you that I've been feeling really left out since you announced the wedding. I know I wasn't chosen as a bridesmaid, and it stings, honestly." The words spilled from me, raw and unedited. Emily's face fell slightly, as if the wind had been knocked from her sails. "I didn't mean to exclude you. It's not that. I had to make some tough choices, and there was so much pressure from family," she replied, tears pooling slightly in her eyes. I hated seeing her upset, yet the frustration bubbled within me. How was it that the planning of her day, a day supposed to bring joy, was also tearing at the fabric of our friendship? We'd always celebrated each other's successes, supporting one another through thick and thin. "Emily, it feels like our friendship doesn't hold the same weight anymore. It's like I started retreating into my feelings, knowing I was on the outskirts of such an important moment for you," I confessed, my voice trembling slightly. I tried to explain that it wasn't just the bridesmaid title, it was about being an integral part of her life. It was about feeling seen, feeling valued. "I want to be there for you, but I also need to know where I fit in, you know?" Emily's expression turned contemplative, a mixture of regret and understanding washing over her. "I really didn't think it would feel like that to you. You mean so much to me, and I understand why you'd be hurt," she said, her voice softening. "I'm sorry. I want you there, despite the traditional roles and things." We stood in silence for a moment, both reflecting upon the rift and the bridge that was slowly being built. My heart warmed with the possibility that there was more to our relationship than just the traditional norms society imposed on these moments. As we spoke more, apologies were exchanged, emotions fluctuated, tears, laughter, and finally a mutual understanding emerged. We decided I'd help with the wedding, not as a bridesmaid but as a devoted friend with a unique role, pivotal to the day yet without any labels that might diminish how I felt. It was then, in that honest exchange, that I realized friendships may shift and change, but that doesn't mean they have to wither away. There was a newfound desire to reshape our dynamic, and it flickered back to life. Months later, on the day of the wedding itself, as I stood near the entrance watching Emily float down the aisle in her magnificent gown, the butterflies inside my stomach danced not from jealousy, but from pride and a sense of elation. I smiled, not because I was there as a part of the bridal party but because I was celebrating my best friend, the one who had chosen to navigate the complexities of life with me instead of leaving me behind. Sure, the wedding didn't bring the same picturesque fantasy I might have fantasized about, but it illustrated how the love we shared had a way of bending, growing, and adapting through life's unexpected turns. I walked over to her after the ceremony, wrapping my arms around her as she glowed in happiness. Despite our hiccup, we were moving forward. Our bond forged stronger against the backdrop of a wedding, not diminished by any single title. As I pulled away from our embrace, I noticed her eyes glistening, not just from the emotional whirlpool of the day but also with gratitude. "You were amazing today," she said, and I couldn't help but smile. It felt like a true acknowledgement, the first step toward healing whatever cracks had formed between us. That moment, wrapped in the warmth of her joy, grounded me, reminding me of all the laughter we'd shared over late-night movies and heartbreaks. We were built on memories, not titles, memories that had survived everything from petty arguments about whose turn it was to pick the restaurant to late-night heart-to-hearts about our wildest dreams. Maybe the role of bridesmaid had taken a backseat, but our friendship deserved recognition of its own, resilient and brimming with history. We stepped into the reception area, the whispers of congratulations. "And you look gorgeous," swirling around us like champagne bubbles. The music pulsed, a contagious beat that made it impossible not to sway a little, despite the awkwardness still nipping at the edges of my mind. I watched as she spun in her dress, her laughter cutting through the noise, and suddenly, I knew I wanted to dive in, to let go of the tension. I grabbed her hand, dragging her toward the dance floor, and we flailed around like two awkward marionettes, laughing as I spun her around, letting the day wash over me. As the night wore on, I took a moment to step outside onto the patio. The stars were twinkling like tiny beacons, and the sounds from inside softened. I pulled my phone out, contemplating the messages flying back and forth with my other friends, all debating whether or not I was right to feel hurt about not being a bridesmaid. Was I supposed to forgive and forget just because I realized that deep down, I craved her happiness more than the recognition? I didn't want to become a subject of petty gossip, but I also didn't want to silence my feelings. I pondered whether I was being irrational. Was I the asshole? I swirled the drink in my hand, suddenly exhausted by the complexity of it all. Then I heard the door creak open behind me. It was her, stepping out into the night, her voice soft and sincere. "Can I join you?" she asked, a hint of vulnerability coloring her tone. I nodded, and we stood side by side, both staring into the dark sky. "Sorry for earlier. I know I messed up not making you a bridesmaid," she started, her words tumbling out like a waterfall of emotions. I felt a knot tighten in my throat. "I thought it would be easier, but I see now how it might have hurt you." I turned to face her, wanting to speak but lost in the depth of her gaze. "It's okay. I value our friendship so much," I finally managed. "It means everything to me. I guess I just felt a little abandoned." There was a pause, a shared silence thick with understanding. "I didn't choose you to be my bridesmaid, but I did choose you to be in my life," she said slowly, her voice carrying weight. "You're still my best friend, and I'm sorry that title hurt you. You deserve to feel celebrated too." She took my hand in hers, warm and reassuring, and for that brief moment, the cosmic tension began to dissolve. This wasn't just about the wedding, it was about articulation, about redefining what mattered most to us. As we resumed our posts on the patio, reflecting on the evening, I realized this was less about the traditional roles we thought we were supposed to fit into and more about the enduring bond we were crafting, one layered with acceptance and understanding. So, as we walked back inside hand in hand, faces beaming with a quiet joy only we could decipher, the night felt alive, vibrant. Not just from the glittering fairy lights or the cheers erupting from friends but from the rekindled spark of our friendship. We had navigated the gray areas, and life, with all its messiness, was still beautiful. And maybe that's the real celebration. I always thought of myself as a generous friend, the kind of person who'd go out of their way to make sure everyone around me felt included and cared for. But this one night, sitting across from Mia at our favorite Italian restaurant, I started to question everything about my kindness. It was supposed to be a simple catch-up dinner, we hadn't seen each other since the chaos of her breakup. As I sat across from her, sipping my water and picking at my risotto, I noticed how her eyes danced with excitement as she perused the menu. She started with a glass of wine, then quickly added an appetizer, followed by a main course that was twice the size of mine, and before I knew it, she was contemplating dessert like it was the only meal she'd eat for a week. My mind raced, and I tried to wrap my head around the idea of splitting the bill equally when it clearly wasn't equal at all. I felt a knot in my stomach. Would she expect me to foot the extra cost because she was having a tough time? Midway through her meal, Mia turned to me with a smile that was both captivating and vaguely suffocating. You know, you don't have to hold back on the spending. Just because I'm in a rough patch doesn't mean I can't enjoy a little splurge, I chuckled awkwardly, trying to brush off the awkward tension that simmered in the air. The thought of her expectation clung to me like an unwelcome guest. I had been there for her during the breakup, offering late-night phone calls and ice-cream-soaked evenings on the couch, but this felt different. As she savored her dessert, I couldn't ignore the mounting frustration. Why was it my responsibility to cover her choices? I contemplated saying something, but every time I opened my mouth, the words fizzled out. Instead, at the end of the meal when the check arrived, I took a deep breath, picked it up, and examined it with the intensity of a detective looking for clues. Mia, I said quietly, I think you ordered quite a bit more than I did, so I'd really prefer we split this based on what we each had. Silence thickened the air between us, and her eyes flashed briefly, confusion mingling with annoyance. Wow, really? I know things haven't been great, but you know I'm not trying to take advantage of you, right? I felt my face heat up. Deep down, I just wanted her to own her choices. But how do you say that to a friend without it sounding cold? Feeling vulnerable, I muttered an apology and paid my half, leaving a slightly awkward silence that lingered long after we parted ways. I drove home that night questioning if I had been an unreasonable jerk. Did standing my ground make me the villain in this friendship? The emotional whiplash gnawed at me, leaving me unsettled. A few days later, there was a text from Mia. Hey, I felt really bad about how I reacted at dinner. I guess I was just trying to enjoy myself, but I should have considered how it would come across. Relief washed over me, but it didn't completely erase the discomfort. I typed a quick reply, letting her know I appreciated her message and understood where she was coming from. Still, the underlying tension lingered in the back of my mind. What did that dinner really mean for our friendship? In the end, I chose to believe I wasn't in the wrong. I needed to stand my ground, after all, even if it came at the cost of a little discomfort. Even now, when gatherings with friends come up, I hesitate over the check at the end, a tiny ripple of anxiety reminding me of that night. But maybe, just maybe, it was a necessary lesson on boundaries and understanding. One little dinner shaped my perspective in ways I never anticipated. I found myself replaying the events of that evening over and over. It was a simple enough dinner, really, a casual meet-up to catch up on life, just the two of us, at that cozy little Italian place we loved. The laughter and easy conversation flowed naturally at first, like it always did. We reminisced about college years, the ridiculous antics of our late-night study sessions. I even managed to muster up the courage to broach the subject of the latest guy she was dating, her eyes lighting up as she described him. But as our plates cleared and the night wore on, the tone shifted just a bit. She, vibrant and enthusiastic, seemed to let the moment carry her a little too far. Let's order dessert, she'd said, her eyes glinting with excitement. I nodded enthusiastically, not wanting to dampen her spirit. We shared a slice of rich tiramisu, layers of coffee-soaked sponge and creamy mascarpone. It was heavenly, and I had no regrets. But then she casually suggested we grab another one, and before I knew it, our waiter was hurrying back to our table with yet another dessert. The check arrived, and I felt my stomach knot. It had jumped up to a shockingly high number. I chewed on my lower lip, glancing at the bill while she was still blissfully absorbed in her dessert. I'll get this one, I said, quickly calculating how much her extra choice would add up to my share. When she turned and smiled, her fork paused mid-air, I felt a rush of annoyance rise in me. Wait, are you serious? You want me to cover your half? That was when things went a little sideways. She shrugged unapologetically, her casual demeanor doing nothing to soothe the tension in my chest. Come on, we can split the dessert. It's only fair. But it felt wrong, like she was assuming my generosity was inexhaustible just because we were friends. I froze, emotions twisting in my stomach. Was I being selfish? Was it about money, or was there something deeper here? We both worked similar jobs, but her recent trips and excessive spending on shoes and other luxuries loomed in my mind. I had to think of my own budget too, especially after I had recently decided to save for a trip I had always wanted to take. Eventually, I moved past it. "No, I can't cover that. I'm good, but this was your choice," I said firmly, my voice steady, but I could tell my resolve surprised her. She frowned, her smile fading, and for a moment, I thought I caught a glimmer of disappointment. "You'd really make me pay for my own dessert?" She replied, the tone now tinged with something sharper than mere surprise. "I thought we were friends." "Friends share everything," I sighed, frustration bubbling just below the surface. "We do, but not everything is fair game. I'm not okay with paying for something I didn't eat." The silence in the air between us felt heavy, almost suffocating. The laughter that had filled our previous conversations drifted away, leaving behind an awkward tension that both of us were too stubborn to break. I could feel the weight of my decision, and as the server returned, I forced myself to say, "Let's split the bill then." I didn't want an argument, I wanted my friend back. She nodded curtly, and I swiped my card, feeling the sting of the moment settle like a stone in my gut. Even in the days that followed, it's like I was reading subtext where there was none. Texts were slow to arrive, and when they did, they felt less charged with warmth than before. It gnawed at me because, deep down, I cared about her. I found myself grappling with my own emotions. Was I justified in standing my ground, or had I pushed her away in the process? Finally, a week later, she invited me to a group outing with friends. I hesitated, unsure if I was ready for another check dilemma, but I missed her too much to decline. As the night unfolded, I braced myself for the awkwardness that might arise. But then, something unexpected happened. There we were, surrounded by mutual friends, and she got up to make a toast. To friendships, both the easy and the hard, and to learning what it means to share. I'm grateful for every miscommunication that teaches me what really matters. Her eyes flickered toward me, and my heart clenched. Did she mean that? I couldn't make sense of the words swirling in my mind, so instead, I raised my glass to her. To being honest, and figuring things out as we go. The group laughed, and, for the first time in days, the tension between us felt like a thread weaving its way back together. Now, as our friendship continues to grow, there's still that tiny ripple of anxiety when it comes to sharing bills, but it's been a lesson. I reevaluate what generosity means, not just for others, but for myself as well. With every dinner outing, I aim to balance giving with being guarded, setting boundaries while still cherishing the moments we have. And who knows? Maybe it's not about who pays for what at the end of each meal but about the conversations we'd fill those moments with. I can't deny that the unease of that dinner still lingers in the background, but it's like a shadow I've learned to accept rather than fear. When Elena texted me again, suggesting we grab lunch at our favorite cafe, my heart did a little dance of excitement and anxiety. I could picture the sun streaming through the windows as we settled into our usual corner table, a cozy nook filled with mismatched chairs and a menu bursting with options. The day arrived, and as I walked in, the smell of fresh brewed coffee enveloped me. Elena was already there, twirling a strand of hair around her finger, a smile lighting up her face. We exchanged our usual pleasantries, and I could feel the past wash away like the fleeting aroma of cinnamon in the air. We fell into easy conversation, sharing stories about our week, the highs, the lows, the mundane details that made us feel alive. It felt good, familiar, like slipping into an old pair of shoes, worn but so comfortable. Then came the time to order. I knew I was being cautious as I scanned the menu, mentally calculating prices, almost hyper-aware of how much a salad versus a rich, creamy pasta dish would cost. The last thing I wanted was to relive that evening at the Italian bistro. When the waiter arrived, I opted for a simple sandwich and water. There was a flicker of worry when I noticed Elena, gleefully pointing to the burger, loaded with extras, and the decadent chocolate cake she insisted on getting for dessert. "Come on. Live a little," she teased, nudging my shoulder playfully. I forced a grin, but inside, I couldn't help feeling that familiar tension creeping back. As we ate, every delicious bite of her burger seemed to weigh on my mind. Did I seem cheap for not indulging like she did? Should I even care? We talked about everything, plans for the weekend, her new project at work, and my recent obsession with gardening, while I tried to focus less on the bill that would eventually come. But deep down, I started to feel that knot of resentment again. Why do I always have to be the one drawing the line? Isn't friendship supposed to be about sharing joy, not just money? After we polished off the last bite of cake, Elena insisted I share with her, saying it'd be a crime not to indulge in dessert together. I felt a pang of guilt for not just letting loose and enjoying the moment. But when the bill arrived, I braced myself. I scanned the total, and my heart sank. It was more than I'd budgeted for. I barely had money left for groceries this week. I took a breath, feeling the tension mix with guilt. Okay, look, I'll cover my part, I said this as nonchalantly as I could, trying to maintain that light-hearted spirit our lunch had encapsulated, even as my nerves unraveled. Elena frowned, her brow furrowing a bit. Seriously? You know I wanted to treat you today, right? It's just lunch. A part of me felt relieved at her insistence, even if it stirred something deeper. I know, and I appreciate it. But really, I'd prefer to split it this time. I'm tight on cash this month. She paused, her expression softening as if she finally understood. Got it. I was just having fun and wanted to celebrate our friendship, you know? I felt a rush of warmth. We can still celebrate without spending too much, right? Her eyes sparkled, right. It's about us, not the money. In that moment, everything clicked. We weren't just friends balancing bills, we were two individuals learning to navigate the complexities of generosity and boundaries together. The anxiety still flickered at the back of my mind, but now it felt different, like a reminder to keep communication open and honest. As we finished up, we walked outside into the crisp afternoon air, laughing over who would win in a race to the nearby park. I realized how freeing it was to keep the conversation light and tethered to experiences rather than expenses. Maybe this was the real lesson. It's okay to set my boundaries while still savoring the joy of connection. Sure, there would still be bumps along the way, and those small ripples of anxiety might never fully dissipate, but I was learning to ride the waves instead of letting them drown me. And sometimes, amidst the laughter and love, that was enough. I never thought my child's third birthday party would turn into a battleground for family loyalty, but here we are, and I suppose I should have seen it coming. Ever since I got married to Max, it felt like I stepped into an episode of a reality show, his family always hovering in the background, ready to weigh in on every little thing we did. From the names we picked for our kids to what we served for Thanksgiving dinner, there was always some kind of criticism, but nothing could have prepared me for the bombshell that came the day they called my daughter a mistake. I remember it so clearly. It was a Saturday afternoon, and Max had invited his parents over to discuss our plans for Mara's birthday. They'd been hinting for weeks about a big family celebration, but as we sat around our tiny kitchen table, the conversation took a harsh turn. Someone mentioned how it was so commendable of us to have a child after what they deemed a rushed marriage. The words hung heavy in the air like a thick fog, and then, like some sick twist of fate, his mother chimed in, well, at least Mara wasn't an oops. What a lovely mistake she could have been. I could feel my stomach drop, like I'd been punched in the gut. The room went silent except for the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. Max's eyes widened in surprise, then quickly shifted to mine, searching for my reaction. I could feel my face blazing hot, and all I could think was how could they say that about our daughter? I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. I hadn't expected this utter disregard for Mara's existence from people who claimed to love her. That was it for me. I decided then and there they wouldn't be invited to the party. And soon, the tension began to simmer beneath the surface at home, even as I came up with a smaller, more intimate celebration, inviting just my parents and a few close friends. Max was torn. He wanted to keep the peace with his family. It's just one party, he said, his voice low and hesitant. But for me, it was so much more than that. I didn't want to celebrate our child's life in the presence of people who believed she was anything less than a miracle. A week later, as the day approached, I could see the disappointment etched in Max's face, and it hurt me more than I expected. I felt guilty, like I was drawing a line in the sand and forcing him to choose between his family and our daughter. But how could I compromise on our child's self-worth? The day of the party, our apartment was bright and cheerful, adorned with colorful balloons and little decorations that I had put up with care. As I watched Mara laugh and play, completely oblivious to the chaos surrounding her lineage, my heart swelled. I had made the right call, I felt it in my bones. But that night, after Mara was tucked in bed, Max laid beside me in silence, tension building like a tightrope waiting to snap. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. They're my family, you know. I wish you could just see things from their perspective. I turned to face him, my heart aching. But they are not considering her perspective. She deserves to feel wanted and loved, and they showed me that they're not capable of that. It felt like a rift had opened up between us, one that was born from love but was fueled by pain and misunderstanding. I wanted to scream, to shake him into understanding my point of view, but all I could do was whisper back, I'm sorry, Max. I can't pretend that their words didn't hurt. And I can't believe they deserve a front row seat to her life. In the weeks that followed, conversations became more strained. I noticed Max's absence during Mara's bedtime stories, his mind clearly elsewhere as he wrestled with unspoken loyalties. Part of me wished I could send a message to his parents, to boldly let them know how their words affected me, how deeply they cut into Mara's innocence. But the other part of me recognized that family dynamics are messy and complicated, often filled with an intricate web of expectancies. I felt lost, uncertain if I did the right thing or truly created an even bigger problem. A few months passed, and I noticed some shifts. Max started standing up for us more. He wouldn't answer every call from his parents, learned to set boundaries that had never been there before. I hoped he was realizing that family is more than blood, it's about respect and love. Some days I still wonder about that invitation I didn't send and how it might have changed the dynamics. We're a family of our own now, and I need to believe we're strong enough to weather any storm, as long as we can shield Mara from any hurtful words. It's an ongoing journey, one filled with bumps and roadblocks, but each day seems to get a bit clearer. Among the chaos, I found something resembling peace, a conviction that my daughter deserves only the most loving, encouraging voices in her life, even if it means disappointing those who can't see her worth. As I lay in bed, I realized that I might not have invited them for this birthday, but I still hope that one day, they may come to understand just how important Mara is, not just to me, but to them too. As I lay in bed, that weighty silence pressing around me, I felt the soft rise and fall of my daughter's breath in the next room. Every small, rhythmic sigh brought me back to the moment we had first brought her home. The world had been so bright and new, I remember cradling her tiny form, whispering promises that I'd always protect her. Yet here I was, days away from her 6th birthday, grappling with the collision of love and hurt. I could still hear the expression on Simon's mother's face when she callously referred to Mara, a slip of the tongue that cut deeper than I think anyone realized. She was a mistake, she had said, her voice dripping with disdain. I sat there, frozen, my heart racing as her words echoed around the table, bouncing between Simon and me, thickening the air until it felt suffocating. We had been discussing the party arrangements, planning a simple backyard gathering with balloons, cake, and giggles. But that day, the festivities turned sour. I had planned on inviting his family, a gesture of goodwill, a way to show Mara that she belongs in this larger family picture. But I couldn't shake that cruel labeling, it festered like an open wound. In Simon's eyes, I saw the confusion morph into fury, his hands clenched into fists on the table, and I felt torn, an invisible tether connecting my love for him and my fierce protection of Mara. Maybe that's when I truly understood, like some slivers of light filtering through clouds, that I had to draw a line. I didn't write the invitations, I couldn't bear the thought of watching his family walk through our front door, smiling, hands outstretched, blissfully unaware of the pain they had hurled at us with such careless ease. I wanted my daughter to feel cherished in all her glorious imperfections, to celebrate the little joys of life without a looming shadow of resentment. Even if it meant disappointing Simon, who believed that family bonds could weather storms, I clung to the notion that Mara's well-being trumped all else. The days ticked down to the party, each passing hour wrought with a heavy uncertainty. Thoughts spiraled like leaves in a whirlwind. What if Simon's family never saw beyond that mistake? What if they became permanent whispers in Mara's ears? I longed to wrap her in a bubble of joy, where only kind words and laughter seeped through. On the eve of her birthday, I set up in the backyard, transforming it into a wonderland. Brightly colored banners waved in the gentle breeze, and the aroma of freshly baked cupcakes lingered in the air. Mara awoke the next morning with a delighted squeal, her eyes sparkling with the promise of adventure. As she bounced through the house, I couldn't help but smile. I had chosen love, had crafted a day where she could simply be a kid, wrapped in the simple joys of friendship, adventures, and her favorite unicorn balloons. When the guests arrived, friends from preschool, neighbors, and my own family, the atmosphere shifted, blooming with laughter and joy. I watched as they tossed confetti and held Mara in their arms, inspecting the cake as if it were the most precious of treasures. Each smile sparked something within me, a flame igniting my heart. Simon arrived late, his expression a mixture of joy and perhaps a shadow of disappointment. After the guests left, he cornered me by the patio, frowning. "You know they're hurt you didn't invite them," he said, a hint of frustration edging his voice. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of that fierce protective instinct I had felt so strongly. I can't have them in our lives if that's how they see our daughter. She needs to know she's not a mistake, not to anyone. The silence expanded between us, a hesitation before release. Finally, after what felt like ages, he nodded quietly, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "I understand," he said, his voice softer now. I could see he was weighing the strands of love and obligation, questioning the dynamic of family ties. As the dusk settled, I held Mara in my arms again, her laughter echoing in sweet harmonies through the space between us. I had chosen this moment, this sacred time, to nourish what mattered most. Maybe the future would lead to reconciliation with his family, to a day when they'd see what a miracle our Mara truly is, but until then, I could live with the uncertainty. She would thrive in the warmth of acceptance, surrounded by those who valued her light, and that was enough for me. Love isn't always perfect, but it is a journey worth every choice made along the way. As I laid her down for the night, I stroked her hair and whispered into the stillness, "You are so loved, my sweet Mara. No mistakes here, only magic." And as I curled up beside her, I realized that sometimes, choosing peace over family ties can be an act of love too. The soft glow of the nightlight cast gentle shadows across the room, and the rhythmic sound of Mara's breathing was like a soothing lullaby, anchoring me in this moment of deep reflection. I had spent months wrestling with the decision to exclude my husband's family from our lives, especially during milestones that felt etched in stone like a birthday. On the surface, it should have been about balloons, laughter, and cake, but the words they had hurled at my precious daughter still echoed in my mind, sharp and unforgiving. "A mistake," they had said, as if she were a typographical error written in the generation before her, a phrase that had become an unwelcome anchor, dragging down my resolve and filling me with a quiet ache. I remembered the tight smiles plastered on faces that should have radiated joy on my wedding day, the strained conversations at family gatherings, where I felt like a puzzle piece that just wouldn't fit. But it was Mara's laughter, pure and innocent, that sparked a flicker of rebellion within me. I'd refused to let that laughter be tainted by their negativity. I wanted her to grow up enveloped in acceptance and love, not the brand of aloofness their cutting comments seemed to carry like a silent banner. As the nighttime shadows danced along the walls, my thoughts circled back to the upcoming party. I pictured all the faces of friends and loved ones who would uplift Mara, gleaming with encouragement and warmth, and I recognized that the absence of her grandparents and aunts was a sacrifice worth making, not just for her, but for my own spirit too. Yes, sacrificing those familial ties felt heavy, but it also felt like a reclamation of all that was sacred. I wanted to ensure that our space remained a sanctuary, one where no one was allowed to question her value, a fortress built from laughter and joy. As I hugged her to me, I flipped through memories of my own childhood filled with unconditional love. The thought that my daughter might walk a different path because of a cold family history sent a shiver through me. Yet everything in me screamed that she was not, nor would ever be, a mistake, and it was a lesson I wanted to impart in bold letters across her soul. In the days that followed, I worked tirelessly to plan her birthday celebration, the air buzzing with activity as I selected vibrant decorations, hand-picked her favorite treats, and invited the people who genuinely cherished us. Friends from the neighborhood, parents of her schoolmates, all of whom viewed her not as an afterthought but as the miracle she truly was. The day of the party unfolded like a fairy tale, filled with warmth, cheer, and an overwhelming sense of belonging. Mara twirled in her favorite dress, her laughter ringing out like a melody that fulfilled every corner of my heart. I felt pride swelling within me, a protective shield against any whispers of doubt. Yet, in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake off the silence that stemmed from my husband's family. I had chosen to sever ties, and while I stood listening to the jubilant chorus of children and adults celebrating, there lingered a slight shadow of regret. I wondered if one day I would be able to explain my choice to Mara without burdening her with the pain that had colored my decisions. Would her family ever come to understand the joy they had missed out on? I let those thoughts drift as the candles were lit, and I watched her make her wish. And in that moment, as she closed her eyes, I realized that love sometimes meant setting boundaries, even when they extended far beyond the people who raised you. With a soft smile, I tucked that lingering sadness away for another time, deciding that for now, the warmth of friendship would be enough. After all, in this new journey, I could see clearly that mistakes were only what we made them, and my daughter? She was a beautiful unblemished canvas, waiting to be painted with love and acceptance, not the scars of hurtful words. As the day closed, with laughter echoing through our home, it dawned on me that family, in all its forms, could still be a tapestry woven from heartstrings that stretched far and wide, even if some threads were lost along the way. I never thought a water fountain could become a point of contention, but here I am, sitting at my kitchen table, staring out at the little slice of paradise my backyard has become. When I bought my house 4 years ago, it came with an abundance of quirks, most of them charming, but there was this one thing that caught my eye immediately: a dilapidated stone fountain, tucked away beneath a tangle of vines and weeds. At first, it seemed like yet another problem to tackle among the many renovations I had lined up. But as I stripped away the layers of neglect, I found something beautiful beneath: the intricate carvings that wove into the stonework, the delightful gurgle of water once I got it running again. It became the heart of my outdoor space, a sanctuary where I could escape after long days of work. Friends and family loved it, and I cherished the evenings spent sipping wine on my patio, the sound of water filling the air. It was my little oasis, and I wasn't about to let go of it easily. But then my neighbor, Lisa, moved in next door, and that's when everything unraveled. She was nice enough at first, friendly, always waving, but there was something about her demeanor that felt off when she mentioned the fountain. One afternoon, she brought over a plate of cookies and casually asked if I'd ever considered giving the fountain to her. "It would really complete my garden," she said, her eyes sparkling with what I could only assume was enthusiasm. I was taken aback, a little incredulous, as I chuckled and politely declined, thinking she was joking. But she wasn't, and from that day forward, her comments turned into subtle hints, and those hints became outright requests. "Think about how much better it would look in my yard," she'd say, and I felt a knot in my stomach every time. I was torn. It was just a fountain, after all, but it was my fountain, a part of my home and heart. Each request felt increasingly invasive, as though she was infringing on something very personal to me. I contemplated various ways to approach her, to explain that it wasn't just about the fountain itself, but about the memories it represented, the peace it brought me after some tumultuous times in my life. Then one evening, she blatantly asked me, "Are you really going to hold on to that fountain forever? It's just sitting there gathering dust." Her words felt like a slap. I could feel my anger bubbling up, fueled by her brazen disregard for my feelings. I tried to explain how much it meant to me, how it represented a fresh start after a tough chapter, but she interrupted, insisting, "You can get another one. It's not like you can keep it forever." We exchanged words, and for the first time, I let her see the fierce protectiveness I had for the fountain, my voice trembling as I said, "I don't want to part with it." She rolled her eyes, and I knew then that we were no longer just neighbors, we were adversaries. Days passed where I felt a heavy weight on my chest whenever I spotted her in her yard. I began to feel self-conscious, paranoid even. Would she think about it every time she looked at her garden? Would my unwillingness to part with a piece of stone ruin the neighborhood peace? I couldn't shake the guilt, but I also couldn't give in. That fountain had become a symbol for me, and letting go would feel like surrendering a piece of myself. I eventually confided in a few friends, and to my surprise, they rallied behind me, urging me to stand my ground. Eventually, after much back and forth, I sat down with her one afternoon, my heart pounding, and reiterated my refusal. "You can't just take what isn't yours," I said, and to my shock, she seemed to soften. She admitted that she was frustrated she didn't have a fountain of her own, and in that moment, I actually felt a twinge of empathy. It wasn't just about the fountain for her, it was probably about wanting something beautiful to make her feel at home too. We ended that conversation on a truce of sorts, more respectful but still a little strained. All these months later, I still feel the weight of that moment, of the decision I made, but I also see the value in what I chose. Preserving my sanctuary was about safeguarding my peace. I found solace in the knowledge that home is not just about the physical space, but the emotions tied to it. It's now been a year since that awkward confrontation, and Lisa and I have made an effort to bridge the gap. We wave at each other, and I even invited her over for coffee a few times. I can't say we'll ever be best friends, but at least we're civil. The fountain still bubbles in my yard, a testament to my journey, a reminder that some things are worth fighting for, and a gentle whisper that sometimes, it's okay to take up space and claim what is yours. As I sit on the patio, the sun spilling warm rays over our little backyard oasis, I watch the water fountain sparkle in the late afternoon light. It bubbles softly, sending little ripples across the surface of the birdbath beneath it, where cheerful robins dip in for brief splashes. I still remember the day Lisa had come over out of the blue, her voice shaky as she demanded I give it back, her eyes wide with disbelief at my firm refusal. It's funny how just a year can change so much. Back then, I felt a cocktail of surprise and frustration at her abruptness, but now, there's a sense of calm, almost acceptance, in our relationship. Sure, we weren't chatting about the favorite shade of lipstick or surviving the latest Netflix series over coffee, but a nod and a wave held their own kind of conversation, didn't they? It felt good to reclaim that space, not just in my yard, but in my life. I've learned to appreciate that sometimes, boundaries are not just about lines drawn in the sand, they're about personal growth and understanding what you deserve. You know, the fountain, once an unwanted artifact in our home, morphed into a symbol of resilience. I even caught myself thinking about how Lisa had painted her life in a stark black and white, while mine gradually became a watercolor, soft and blending, colorful and hopeful. One afternoon, after inviting her over for coffee again, I decided to take a chance. As Lisa sipped her latte and glanced curiously at the bubbling fountain, I mentioned how I'd been considering adding some pebbles around the base, maybe even a few plants to create a more inviting atmosphere. She hesitated, her brow furrowing slightly, and I could almost see her weighing her words, like she was taking measured steps into a land that felt unfamiliar. You know, she said cautiously, I always thought that fountain had a wrong place in our neighborhood, but now I see it fits. Her voice trailed off, and a hint of a smile danced on her lips. At that moment, it struck me how layered our emotions had been, how much history nestled beneath the surface of our seemingly mundane interactions. It felt like a truce, a mutual recognition that our choices shaped our spaces, but they didn't have to define us entirely. After that coffee, I found myself reflecting on our lives more deeply. Maybe we were more alike than different, two women figuring out our place in this world, both grappling with our own battles but learning to navigate the complexities of adult relationships. Every time I looked at the fountain, it reminded me of the bubbling emotions we often kept bottled inside, just waiting for a spark to bring them back to life. Season by season, as the fountain continued to flow and thrive, I planted flowers around it, and they blossomed, matching the vibrant changes occurring in my life. They seemed to invite bees and butterflies to our little corner of the world, echoing the beauty of growth and coexistence. Then one afternoon, while arranging a cluster of marigolds around the edge, I noticed Lisa standing by the fence, watching me. Unlike before, her expression was softer, more open. I was just admiring your flowers, she called out, and for a moment, I paused, feeling a thread of connection weave silently through the air. Thanks. Want to help? I blurted out, a mix of unexpected eagerness and genuine hope pouring out. To my surprise, she hopped over without hesitation and spent a couple of hours digging in the dirt, laughter spilling from us in easy waves as we swapped stories about everything from home projects to quirky family traditions. I don't know if that afternoon changed everything, but it certainly shifted the momentum between us. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that preserving space, and fighting for it, can lead to unexpected connections. The fountain, once a source of tension, turned into a centerpiece of friendship, an unlikely bond flowing gracefully through the currents of our lives. And as those blooms opened under the sun, I realized that sometimes, it's not just about claiming what's rightfully yours, but also about sharing the beauty in your life with others, creating something larger than both of you. So here I sit, cup of tea in hand, watching a new chapter unfold, one that flows as effortlessly as the water in that soft, bubbling fountain. The sun hung low in the sky, pooling golden light in my backyard, illuminating the gentle dance of leaves stirred by a light breeze. As I sat with my cup of tea, I couldn't help but think about how much had changed. The fountain, with its rhythmic bubbling, seemed almost alive, gurgling its secrets while I reflected on this past year. Lisa's visits had become frequent, and in a way, they felt like nurturing the roots of a friendship that I hadn't seen coming. Funny how a piece of stone and water could forge a connection between two people who had once viewed each other as enemies. I often marveled at how we would sit on my patio, talking over the sound of that bubbling fountain while the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the grass. Initially, our conversations danced around pleasantries, but gradually they deepened, sharing stories about our childhoods, our aspirations, and even our fears. I learned that Lisa had spent years feeling like an outsider, displaced from her cherished home that had been sold to its current landlord, and how she often wished she could reclaim even just a small piece of it. That, perhaps, was her own fight for space, one she had focused on before my waterfall had come into the picture. Some days, in the soft glow of twilight, I could sense her longing as she gazed at the fountain, as if it were a bridge to a past she missed. "It really is such a beautiful feature," she would say, her voice low and contemplative. "I remember how it used to be in my parents' yard. Just a small, humble pot with a bit of trickling water, but it sparked so many happy gatherings." Each of her memories wove a thread between us, connecting our experiences in unexpected ways. We grew closer, too, when we would host neighborhood gatherings, allowing others to see our evolving friendship. The fountain stood as a testament to our ability to create something positive from old grudges. I remember the day when the first blush of spring arrived, and we teamed up to organize a small block party. As laughter filled the air and children played by the fountain, I caught a glimpse of Lisa's smile, unrestrained and genuine. It was as though she had set down the burdens of comparison and jealousy. And honestly, I felt lighter too. The bitterness I had once clung to had slipped away, replaced by a sense of shared joy. But like a breeze that turned suddenly, our connection met a momentary pause. One day, Lisa arrived with a different energy about her. There was a weight in her smile, a melancholic shadow behind her eyes. "I may have to move," she said, sitting down at the edge of my patio. The words hung in the air, heavier than I expected. After months of building something I thought was strong and lasting, my heart sank. "My job is relocating me. I'm going to have to leave the neighborhood in a few weeks." For a moment, everything felt surreal. I resisted the urge to fold in on myself, to protect my heart from the thought of losing this friendship we had carefully nurtured. "Is there any way to stay?" I blurted out, wishing I could teleport her into staying just a little longer. But she shook her head with a gentle sadness, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. "I wish. I'll miss our tea times, and I'll miss the fountain in your yard, too." Those words struck me. It was more than just a fountain, it represented our journey together, the growth we nurtured in one another through shared laughter and vulnerability. I realized then that preserving space isn't just a matter of claiming something physical, it's also about creating emotional ties and legacy in our lives. I took a breath and cleared my throat. If you have to move, you have to move. But how about instead of saying goodbye, we make this an adventure? Let's start planning some visits, and I'll send you updates about the fountain, what blossoms, what birds arrive, and who visits. It can be our place still. A smile broke through her somber demeanor, and just like that, our moment of uncertainty transformed. "You promise?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with hope. "I want to hear all the stories." We both laughed, and I could feel the air lightening around us. It was a conversation that echoed what I had learned: while standing your ground is important, allowing yourself the flexibility to share experiences and memories with others can lead to bonds that withstand distance. As the last embers of daylight faded, we sat together in comfortable silence. Each bubble of the fountain seemed to whisper promises of continuity. I stared out at the sparkling water, realizing that this moment, though bittersweet, would not mark the end but rather a new chapter, one that could flow just as effortlessly as the water coursing through our fountain. And as I watched her leave that evening, the warm glow of a blossoming friendship buzzed around me like the remnants of sunlight. Even if space would separate us, the connection we forged would carry on, a reassuring flow that time would not dim. I never thought I would find myself in a situation where I'd have to question my friendship with Jenna, but here we are. It all started innocently enough. We met in college, two awkward freshmen navigating the maze of dorm life together. Our friendship flourished as we shared late-night study sessions fueled by pizza and too many energy drinks, laughably bonding over our failed attempts at dating. But somewhere along the way, things shifted. I started throwing small get-togethers, just 8 or 10 of us, mostly to celebrate milestones like birthdays or just the fact that it was Friday. But there was something about Jenna's attendance at these parties that began to weigh on my mind. She would show up, of course, always dressed to the nines, charming the other guests with her vivacious energy. But as the night wore on, there was a familiar script: she'd monopolize conversations, drifting from one group to another, leaving a wake of uneasy tension. I'd try to steer her away from making crass jokes about our friends, and more than once, I found myself making half-hearted excuses to distance myself from her antics. It reached a point where I dreaded sending out those invites, knowing that Jenna would show up and overshadow everything with her loud laughter, often aimed at jabs that didn't sit well with anyone. One evening, after another party where I spent too much time apologizing for her behavior, I finally broke down. I texted her, a decision that felt monumental, a mix of fear and relief swirling in my stomach. "Hey, I think I need to take a step back from inviting you to parties. It's just hard to manage things when you're there." I stared at the screen, my pulse racing as I waited for her response. The 3 bubbles floated for what felt like an eternity before her message came back, sharp and cold. "Wow. I can't believe you'd say that." I felt this strange mixture of guilt and empowerment flood through me. Was I the asshole for wanting to reclaim my space, my friendships, my peace of mind? The days that followed were awkward. I avoided larger friend groups fearing that the conversation would come back to Jenna, and I tiptoed around mutual friends who seemed torn between us. Jenna didn't reach out. It felt like I'd taken a match to a bridge I didn't want to burn but had no choice in doing so. But then, one night, I received a simple text from a mutual friend, She was wondering if I wanted to grab coffee. I hesitated at first, but curiosity won me over. Over steaming mugs, she shared Jenna's side. Apparently, Jenna felt isolated and hurt, convinced that everyone loved her except me. I hadn't noticed she'd been going through some personal stuff, and all the over-the-top antics had been an attempt to mask her vulnerability. I felt a pang of regret, mixed with the thought that maybe I hadn't handled the situation in the best way. I reached out to Jenna, just an olive branch of sorts, keeping it light, suggesting we go out for drinks and talk. The conversation was awkward, yet as we spoke, I realized we both had missed the mark with each other. I shared my perspective, and she showed me hers. Looking back, I'm still not sure if I was entirely in the right or if I was actually being an asshole. I learned that sometimes friendships require deeper conversations and understanding instead of ultimatums. We've been trying to rebuild a foundation, one conversation at a time, hopefully forging a new path forward with a little more grace and a lot more empathy. I remember the first time we truly sat down to talk, the clink of ice in our glasses echoing in the small booth wedged against the back wall of that bar. It felt almost surreal, like characters in a movie on the brink of reconciliation. I could sense the tension weaving between us, a taut string just waiting to snap under the weight of our histories and miscommunications. She looked different in the dim bar light, her usually guarded expression softened by the flickering candle between us. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the emotional tug-of-war ahead. I just didn't see it coming, I said, hoping my words would take root in a space where we could finally meet in the middle. Every party I threw, you seemed withdrawn. I could feel my excitement dimming when I saw you on the edge of the crowd, not really engaging with anyone. She leaned back, visibly grappling with my words. Well, you never asked me how I felt about it, did you? Her voice had that familiar, soft edge of vulnerability that I'd come to recognize, a hint of frustration layered within. It felt like you were trying to appease the group, and I was just part of the decoration. I frowned at her choice of word, decoration. Without thinking, I blurted, I didn't mean to treat you like an accessory. I noticed a flicker of hurt flash across her face, and I quickly backtracked. I just thought we were going through the motions together. I wanted to share good times, she sighed deeply, fingers tracing the condensation pooling on her glass. I see that now. But sometimes, it felt like you were more interested in being the host than being my friend, like you needed a perfect party, and I was just an extra. Those words hit hard. I wanted to argue, to insist that my intentions had been true, but I paused, allowing her feelings to seep in. It dawned on me that maybe I had been so focused on creating the perfect social atmosphere that I'd lost sight of what really mattered, connection. The conversation rolled into the night, bouncing between minor grievances and heartfelt sentiments, the awkwardness gradually giving way to genuine understanding. I learned how she viewed our friendship, the highs and lows she felt in the backdrop of my social life. Between laughter and serious revelations, there was a palpable sense of repair in the air. It wasn't perfect, there were still silences that hung like clouds, full of unsaid things, and sometimes the guilt would eat away at me when I thought of those evenings where her laughter felt distant. Yet, as the hours passed, I felt something shift. We weren't where we had been before, but maybe we didn't have to be. The next few months were a delicate dance of rebuilding, peppered with coffee dates and book exchanges instead of parties. Our conversations deepened, touching not just on the light topics but on dreams, failures, and everything in between. I remember one late afternoon, sitting in a cafe where the sunlight danced on the floor like an old friend, she confessed she struggled with vulnerability. I matched her honesty by admitting that I had a habit of ghosting the deeper emotions, preferring to sidestep anything that felt too heavy or complicated. It was in those moments of shared truth that I started to see that my approach could be problematic, stunted. No more half-hearted invites to gatherings and overlooking how her absence echoed in my life. I committed to including her, not out of obligation, but out of a genuine desire to nurture our relationship. Still, I couldn't shake that lingering question from our first talk. Was I the asshole for needing to set boundaries, or was it my fault for not recognizing the friendship was fraying? Perhaps it was a bit of both, a complex tapestry woven with missteps and misunderstandings. Ultimately, it was clear that the journey to mend our friendship was more about understanding than assigning blame. And while I didn't know where we might end up, the path forward felt much clearer each time we shared a moment together, each new memory a building block toward something stronger. So here we are, navigating this space with more grace and empathy, discovering that perhaps the true test of friendship isn't in our moments of success but the nuances of our failures, learning to forgive not just each other but ourselves, one conversation at a time. One of those pivotal moments came just a week later, after an unexpectedly rainy Saturday kept me cooped up at home. I had just settled onto my couch, a pile of takeout boxes littering the coffee table, when my phone buzzed with a text from Jess. "Want to take a walk? I have something to talk about." My stomach flipped. I didn't want to overanalyze the invitation, but instinctively I knew that this wasn't just about a stroll in our favorite park. I felt both apprehension and a tingling sense of hope as I replied with a simple, "Sure. Just give me a few." As we walked side by side, the clouds hanging low above us, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and new beginnings, Jess broke the silence first. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. I realized I've been so focused on feeling excluded that I didn't see how my actions contributed to the mess we found ourselves in." The sincerity in her voice pierced through the tension that had lingered between us since our last heart-to-heart. I couldn't help but smile, feeling a weight lift just from her honesty. Yeah, and for me, it was about feeling unheard, like my frustrations didn't matter. It wasn't about the parties, but about feeling like my feelings were being brushed off. I guess I was tired of making excuses for why I needed boundaries. The words spilled from me, as if I was finally allowing myself to breathe and let the air of vulnerability flow freely between us. "I never wanted you to feel left out, but it feels like every time I extended an invitation, you were going through your own thing. I didn't know how to reach you." Jess nodded solemnly, her brow furrowing in thought. "I see that now. I was dealing with my own issues, stress at work, family stuff, but I didn't realize I was shutting you out. I thought I was protecting myself, you know?" There was a pause as we stopped beneath the swaying branches of an old oak tree. The wind rustled its leaves, mirroring the turbulence of our unresolved emotions. "I missed you, I really did," she continued, her voice softer now, more delicate, like the moment itself. "I guess I just didn't know how to reach out without feeling ashamed." I took a deep breath, feeling the sincerity of her words wrapping around my heart like a hug. "We're in this together, Jess. I don't want you to feel ashamed of needing space. But we have to communicate, stop dancing around issues. We owe each other the honesty, even when it feels uncomfortable." Armed with a new mutual understanding, we began to talk more openly about our expectations. Sure, there were discussions about plans, but also about our emotional landscapes, our worries, and dreams. We started meeting not just during events in the community but for the little things: coffee on lazy Sundays, movie nights where we'd laugh over outdated films, moments that glimmered brighter than any party we had ever hosted. The rebuilding wasn't smooth, I'd be lying if I said it was easy. Sometimes we'd slip back into old habits, forgetting to check in with each other. But with each misstep, each awkward text or accidental silence, we would remind ourselves that growth isn't a straight line. It's more of a sprawling web of mistakes and little triumphs, golden threads weaving us tighter. Months passed, and while our friendship wasn't wholly restored, it felt reborn, like a flower stubbornly blooming through asphalt, resilient and beautiful. I realized that it was okay not to have all the answers, to not put an official label on our bond just yet. What mattered was the journey we navigated together, filled with more understanding. And even in silence, we were learning to be okay. One day, at a small gathering at another friend's house, I caught Jess's eye across the crowded room. She raised her glass, a smile blooming on her face. That simple gesture felt monumental, like we had said so much without uttering a single word. Looking back now, I think about the precarious balance of friendships and how vulnerability, when shared, can create something beautiful from chaos. Sometimes, all it takes to mend a frayed connection is acknowledging our imperfections and extending the grace to learn together. And as I stand on this winding path, uncertain of where it leads, I feel a new sense of resilience alongside Jess, a promise that we would continue to navigate the hard conversations, weaving our laughter and heartaches into the intricate tapestry of our friendship one day at a time. I never expected to find myself at odds with my family over something as simple as a door. Living alone in a small apartment, I had carved out my little sanctuary, a place where I could escape the world's chaos and indulge in quiet moments with a good book or a long, hot shower. It was my haven, and after the relentless demands of work and social events that filled my calendar, I often craved solitude. That's why, when my aunt and uncle decided to drop by unannounced last Saturday, I felt a rush of anxiety flood through me like ice water. I had barely returned from a stressful week at the office, 2 deadlines looming over me like dark clouds, and the last thing I needed was an unexpected visit. When I heard the persistent knock on my door, my heart sank. Every part of my being screamed to ignore it, to hunker down with some takeout and let the world fade away. They were the kind of relatives who wouldn't take no for an answer, and I had a pretty good idea that they wouldn't be content with a quick pleasantry at the door before moving on. I stood frozen in the hallway, my mind racing. What if they couldn't see how tired I was? Just duck into the kitchen and hope they give up, I thought, but the knocking intensified, almost urgent. I took a deep breath and, against my better judgment, I opened the door just a crack, enough to catch a glimpse of their expectant faces. The look of surprise on my uncle's face morphed into disappointment as he realized I wasn't prepared for their visit. "Oh, hey. We thought we'd stop by. It's been ages," he exclaimed, as if time bent and twisted in some miraculous way to make their interruption appropriate. I felt the corners of my mouth twitch with nerves. "Hi, yeah, sorry. I didn't know you were coming," I stammered, avoiding their eager gazes. The truth was, I was overwhelmed, tired, and bleeding introversion that day. The warmth of my community sometimes felt like a suffocating blanket rather than a comforting embrace. I wanted to say, "I love you both, but could you please just text first next time?" Instead, I just stood there while they continued to chatter about their week like I should be all ears. In amidst their dialogue, my thoughts spiraled. Am I being unreasonable? Am I really the boss of my own space, or have I lost touch with what family means? I scanned the apartment and realized my living room looked like a tornado had swept through. Mismatched socks strewn on the floor, a half-eaten slice of pizza languishing on the coffee table, definitely not the kind of setting I wanted to showcase. I knew they would judge, not that they meant to, but from experience, I knew my aunt's disapproving eyebrow would only rise higher the longer I stood there. "You have a minute?" she asked, as they pushed their way inside, unaware of the whirlwind of emotions brewing inside me. "Actually, I'm really in the middle of something," I mumbled, my voice barely more than a whisper. But my attempt to stand my ground fell flat. Family members don't generally take those kinds of refusals on face value. And, like a slow-burning fuse, resentment began to ignite. I felt trapped between my genuine care for them and my desperate need for peace. The unease spun into a knot in my stomach. Was I the bad guy for wanting to protect my own mental space? They began to settle in, invading my sanctuary with their animated banter, laying their jackets on my couch, leaning over to inspect my bookshelves as if they were an exhibit. It dawned on me that they had no clue how much I longed for solitude at that moment, how important those quiet Saturday afternoons were for my sanity. The more they laughed and caught up, the more distant I felt, like a spectator in my own life. I remembered countless Sunday dinners when spontaneity put a smile on my face, but this one was different. A part of me wanted to just fold into their warmth, to let the walls come down, but the other part was desperate for a clean break from the world outside. Finally, after an hour of small talk filled with casual questions about my work and my love life, or lack thereof, I mustered the courage to intervene, gently asserting, "Hey, I really appreciate you guys stopping by, but I'm feeling a bit exhausted. Can we catch up another time?" Their cheerful expressions faltered, disappointment clouding their faces. "Oh, but we came all this way," my aunt began, her voice dropping an octave, inscribing guilt deeper into the fabric of my resolve. "That's the thing about family, sometimes, even love can carry an expectation, an unspoken demand that feels heavier than steel." As they finally gathered their things, I felt a mix of relief and guilt gnawing at my insides. Had I overstepped? Was I too harsh in my execution? I closed the door behind them, their voices fading down the hall, questioning my choices like fair-minded jurors. Hours passed, and I sat cross-legged on the floor amidst the chaos of my living space, letting the internal battle wane. The authenticity of my emotions washed over me in waves. Maybe I wasn't the asshole. Maybe needing alone time wasn't some personal failing. But the lingering question echoed in my mind, would they see it that way? In the days that followed, I texted my aunt to suggest we meet for coffee later in the week. "I'm sorry I wasn't up for a visit, work has been a lot," I wrote, hoping to bridge the chasm. I saw her reply flash on the screen, "No worries, we'll plan something. We miss you." Part of me sighed in relief, while another part knew this was just the beginning of a longer conversation about boundaries, connection, and the balance of family. Because in the end, maybe it wasn't about being right or wrong, perhaps it was about understanding each other's needs without sacrificing one's own peace. And maybe, just maybe, I could learn to do both. That interaction with my mom lingered in my mind for days. I took that moment to reflect on our relationship, something I had been avoiding for far too long. I never intended to be the estranged family member. I simply found myself caught in the whirlwind of adult life, work obligations, personal goals, and the day-to-day chaos that came with it. But their way of expressing love felt overwhelming at times, like a tidal wave crashing over me. I set aside my phone and gazed out the window, watching as leaves scattered in the wind, twisting and turning in ways that reminded me of the often erratic nature of our family dynamics. My family had long adopted a policy of drop by unannounced, a tradition I found charming at first but now felt like an intrusion into my carefully curated solitude. I appreciated the effort, truly, but I questioned whether they understood that my home was my sanctuary, a place I needed to recharge away from the world's demands. The guilt of not being who they wanted me to be crept in like an unwanted guest, taunting me with thoughts of how they must perceive my distance. Yet, I had never felt more like myself than I did now, navigating my boundaries. It didn't take long for that uneasy tension to rise again when Thomas, my brother, suggested a weekend visit. I braced myself, knowing that I'd be the odd one out at the dinner table, dishing out platitudes while my family laughed over nostalgic stories, all while I hovered over my thoughts like a wallflower at a party. This time, though, I felt a tug, a mix of obligation and desire to maintain that connection, even if it was strained. "Hey, can we chat about when you guys come?" I typed hesitantly, deciding to voice my concerns before the weekend arrived. I didn't want another instance of family craziness that left me feeling frazzled and misunderstood. A short reply came back, "What's up? We're excited to see you." I swallowed hard. There was that sense of enthusiasm again, crackling through the screen as if I were there with them. Maybe it was an opportunity for understanding, or perhaps it would swing like a pendulum back to my fears of rejection. Saturday morning drapes the house in a hazy light, and the doorbell pierces through the quiet like a gunshot. My heart races as I stand in the middle of the living room, frozen in place, and the moment stretches into eternity. Hand clenched around the doorknob, I hesitated, considering the possibility of peeling back the layers of silence, of explaining that I craved acceptance of my choices, my pace, my space. Instead, I took a deep breath and unlocked the door, plastering on a smile that I hoped didn't betray any anxiety. Their startled faces morphed into grins, and the warmth of their presence filled the hallway, intoxicating and overwhelming all at once. "We brought your favorite." My mom held up a blueberry pie, and for a fleeting second, the sweetness of nostalgia wrapped around me like a hug, but the tension brewed just beneath. I invited them in, trying desperately to hold on to the comfort while wrestling with unease. As they settled in like they owned the place, the conversations rushed and tumbled over each other, but every sound felt amplified, a cacophony of expectation, love, and my desire for silence. I knew I had to seize this moment to lay bare my feelings. "You know," I started, my voice shaking slightly, "I appreciate these spontaneous visits, I really do, but sometimes I just need a little heads up." They halted, all eyes on me, surprise etched across their faces. My stomach knotted, and I can hardly bear the silence that ensued. But then, slowly, my brother nodded while my mom frowned slightly, a wrinkle of puzzlement forming on her forehead. "Oh, honey, we didn't know you felt that way," she whispered, her voice softening. A flicker of hope ignited in me. The moment hung in the air, heavy yet tender, and in that silence, acceptance danced delicately among us, paving a newfound path. As the afternoon rolled on, we spoke more openly, the conversation bridged gaps I feared would swallow me whole. They acknowledged my need for space, and slowly, we carved out a rhythm that allowed for both connection and solitude. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the blue sky igniting in a riot of orange and pink hues, we had not only shared laughter and stories but also something even more precious, understanding. I sat back, quietly content, relishing the newfound balance of knowing that love could be given without drowning, that boundaries didn't have to mean isolation, and yes, that my voice mattered in the symphony of our family. As I waved goodbye, my heart felt a little lighter, and I realized this was just the beginning, not just for them, but for me, a dance toward that ever-elusive harmony between connection and self-care. As I watched their car disappear down the winding road, clarity washed over me. I had navigated so many emotional landmines recently, battling guilt and resentment while trying to figure out where I fit into this intricate web of familial love and obligations. I couldn't help but smile. Maybe it wasn't about asserting myself with brash words or avoidance anymore, it was about conversing, sharing space, and, most importantly, communicating my needs without feeling like I was the villain. I felt like I was finally shedding the layers of guilt that had wrapped around me like a heavy blanket for years. The next week, I decided to open a dialogue with my siblings during our regular Sunday video call. The cozy backdrop of my living room, with its soft, ambient lighting, felt like a good setting for what I hoped would be an honest discussion. As we chatted, I could feel my heart racing a little. My brother started talking about an upcoming family reunion, throwing numbers and dates at me as if I was sitting on the edge of a precipice. The old urge to either withdraw or placate them bubbled up. "Hold on a minute," I finally found my voice and said. "I really appreciate that you guys want to include me, but I've been feeling overwhelmed with everything." The screen filled with thoughtful faces as I tried to find the right words. "I love you all, and I want to be part of this, but I also need time for myself. If I push myself to show up for everything, I won't be able to show up at all," I confessed. Silence followed, a rare occurrence. I could see my sister's brow furrowing, and I worried I'd said too much. Then, slowly, her expression softened. "I get that," she said. "We want you to take care of yourself. You're not being selfish. You're human." That simple acknowledgement felt like a life buoy tossed my way when I had been treading water trying to keep everyone else afloat. One by one, they shared. They talked about their own struggles balancing social events and the pressure to conform to family expectations. As I listened, something shifted in the energy of our call, an empathic exchange that filled the gaps I had felt before. Each realization we shared breathed new life into our connection. By the end of that hour, I felt more heard and understood than I had in years. The weight of expectation lifted a little more off my chest, replaced by a reassuring warmth. Maybe they did see me and my struggles after all. Weeks turned into months, and I began to reshape not just my boundaries but our collective family dynamics. I found peace in saying what I needed, be it declining an invitation or suggesting a smaller gathering over a chaotic family event. Surprisingly, changes rippled through us. My siblings began to vocalize their own needs more openly, and in a way, we all started forging a richer, more authentic relationship. In realizing my own boundaries, I inadvertently encouraged them to explore theirs. Looking back, it's funny how that initial hesitation to open the door to unannounced visitors had been a pivotal moment. I didn't shut them out, I just showed them I needed space, a new boundary. It wasn't a rejection, it was a request for understanding. Life with family wasn't about keeping score or avoiding conflict, it was about building a comfortable home in each other's hearts, however imperfect the walls might be. And here I am, on the edge of another sunset, wondering what the future holds for us all, MacGuffins of emotion and history mingling with reverberations of laughter and love. I can feel the promise of more conversations ahead that will continue to carve out our path as we venture toward a fuller, more nuanced version of family. It's not a perfect resolution, but it's a hopeful beginning, one day at a time. I never thought I'd find myself in this situation, but here I am, staring at my new tattoo, not sure if I'm the hero or the villain of my own story. For the last 2 years, my boyfriend, Jake, and I had been living hand in hand, going through the ups and downs of life together in our tiny one-bedroom apartment. He's the kind of guy who dreams big, and I've always loved that about him. His ambition fuels my own. We talked about engagement frequently, and while I wasn't nagging him, I was starting to feel that itch for a ring that we had sort of agreed on. So, after almost a year of saving up, I had stashed away about $1,000, earmarked specifically for a beautiful engagement ring I had seen in a local shop. The plan was to keep saving until I had enough to take him out to dinner, drop down on one knee, and ask him to be my forever. But then, life happened. Just a few weeks ago, the itch for something permanent became too strong. I had always dreamed of getting a tattoo to commemorate a moment in my life, but never found the right time or design until a sudden burst of inspiration hit me. I wanted to capture a symbol of our journey together, something that could feel like both a celebration and a mark of our commitment. So, on a whim, I walked into a tattoo parlor and dropped that $1,000 on an intricate design of a compass, where we each planned to add our initials to signify that we were each other's direction. The moment the needle hit my skin, I felt exhilarated, a rush that pushed aside any guilt I might have felt. Yet, once the high faded, the guilt settled in heavy. I started envisioning Jake's face when he'd find out, and the thought gnawed at me for days. I could see the disappointment brewing in his eyes, could imagine the way his mouth would drop open slightly in disbelief. When I finally confessed after dinner one night, it didn't go as smoothly as I had hoped. His expression went from confusion to frustration, and he snapped out of it with, "You spent our ring money? On a tattoo? Seriously?" It felt like a punch to the gut. As the words hung in the air, I tried to explain my thought process, how this felt like something I had needed for myself in that moment, but he just shook his head. "I just can't believe you chose a tattoo over the future we talked about." His tone was flat, and I felt every bit of anger and disappointment directed at me. I wanted to scream that it was more than just ink, it was a representation of everything we'd built together, but all he could see was the dollars and the broken promise. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wrestling with doubt. Part of me was excited about my tattoo, grateful for the way it reminded me of our love, but another part of me felt like I had just sabotaged the best thing I had ever had, the chance to build a life together with the person I adored. Days turned into a week, and the space between us began to feel like an echo of things left unsaid. I wanted to give him time to process, but I also felt the gnawing uncertainty. Had I ruined everything? Did I prioritize a fleeting moment over a lasting commitment? In the end, we had a long conversation a few days later, and Jake surprised me. He admitted he understood my need for self-expression and how significant it was for me, but he still felt cheated out of a moment that meant so much to him. In that moment, I promised him that I'd take on extra shifts to help us save up again for the ring. We both needed to blend our dreams together instead of letting diverging paths fracture the love we had. So, we're still together, still saving, just with a compass tattoo on my forearm and a shared resolve to navigate our way forward. Looking back, I hope I made the right choice, but I guess that's something we're both figuring out together. As I reflect on that moment, lying in bed with the weight of my decision still settling in my heart, I realize how fragile our dreams can feel. The tattoo, a simple compass, represents more than my desire for adventure and my love for the sea. It captures the essence of us, two people charting a course through life, not always aligned on every detail, but willing to navigate the waves together. The next few weeks were a mix of bittersweet emotions. I took on as many extra shifts as I could manage at the cafe, pouring coffee and exchanging pleasantries with customers while my mind often drifted back to the conversation I had with Matt, where he expressed his disappointment so genuinely. Each night, exhausted after long hours, I'd come home to find him nestled on the couch, usually with takeout containers cluttering the coffee table. His face would light up when I walked in, and I'd pretend those little moments, filled with warmth and kindness, were enough to erase the tension from before. One Saturday morning, as I served him pancakes topped with strawberries, I noticed the shadows under his eyes slowly fading. He seemed lighter, and I thought maybe the tattoo had struck a chord with him too. "You know," he said between bites, "it's not just about the ring, right? It's what it symbolizes for us." His gaze was steady, and I felt a rush of warmth realizing we were rebuilding our dreams, step by step. The conversation lingered with me, swirling in my mind through the afternoon as I painted my nails, gazing at the compass. I had adorned a symbol of our navigation, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of insecurity that nestled just beneath the surface. I started wondering if I'd ever really be able to save for that ring again. But as weeks turned into months, our shared compromise began to feel like a shared bond. We spoke about potential timelines, future plans, and the kind of life we wanted to build. None of that felt rushed, but rather infused with mutual respect. Matt confided one evening about his own dreams to travel, revealing a longing I hadn't fully seen before. "How about we save for a trip instead? Just you and me, on our own adventure," he said, an expectant grin spread across his face. There was something exhilarating about the idea, pulling us from societal expectations into a realm we could mold together. So, we changed trajectories again, setting aside the engagement ring talk for the moment, focusing instead on our travel fund. The tattoo became an anchor of sorts, reminding us to always return to our true north. It marked a chapter in our relationship, a beautiful reminder of the moment we chose communication over disappointment. Every time I glanced at it, that little compass invoked the promise of exploration, encouraging us to seek out new paths where dreams intertwined. Life moved forward like that, simple yet filled with the unexpected joys of our daily rhythms. Still, a part of me wrestled with the ghost of that elusive engagement ring, now a distant wish rather than an immediate goal. Was I selfish for prioritizing my desires over his expectations? I often questioned it, but then I'd see the look in Matt's eyes when we planned our travel itinerary, the spark of excitement that reminded me that we were figuring this out as we went. Eventually, we took our first trip together, the result of a few months of meticulous budgeting and shared late-night planning sessions that felt far more rewarding than simply swiping a card for impulse buys. As we trekked through the hills of a quaint little town filled with art and adventure, I felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment wash over me. We hiked to a viewpoint one evening, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, I could see in Matt's gaze something deeper than our previous expectations. "You know," he whispered, "if we ever do get engaged, it'll be because we've made this journey together." I nodded, realizing that this path felt right, even if it was not the one I initially thought I was meant to take. The uncertainty still lingered, but it felt safe nestled beside his confidence in our partnership. Now, as I sit here recounting this experience, that small compass on my forearm feels less like a marker of a choice I made on a whim and more like a testament to the beauty of navigating life together. I hope we're making all the right choices, but even if we stumble along the way, I know we'll figure it out side by side. That promise alone is worth more than any ring ever could be. I can't help but smile whenever I catch a glimpse of that compass, its lines etched in ink, a little reminder of the journey we're on. It's funny how something that started as a spontaneous decision transformed into a symbol of our bond. Through countless conversations over takeout dinners and quiet evenings on our cramped couch, it became evident that this wasn't just about the ring or the tattoo, it was about us redefining what commitment truly meant. Sure, there were moments filled with tension. I could still see the flicker of disappointment in Daniel's eyes each time I pulled up my sleeve, revealing my new ink. It wasn't reluctance he felt, it was the shadow of expectations, the weight of what he had imagined for us. But then there were also shared smiles, laughter bubbling up over iced coffee as we scrolled through engagement ring designs online. We increasingly found ourselves dreaming instead about adventures, discussing places we wanted to explore, and traditions we wanted to create. There's something about pooling dreams together that made the prospect of marriage feel closer, more tangible. I even joked that maybe we could just stamp passports with our love story instead of just fingers adorned with gold. Daniel laughed, his brows raised. It was a silly notion, but it was mine, a glimpse into my heart reaching out to him. Weeks turned into months, and while I continued to take on extra shifts, we also began mapping out our game plan. What if we saved just a little more for a trip next summer? I proposed one evening as we spread out a world map on the floor, filled with pinned locations and scribbled notes. To my delight, he spotted a little island off the coast of Thailand, and he was enthralled. We could watch the sunrise from the beach, just us and the horizon, he said, eyes sparkling, and in that moment, I saw not just a vision but a promise, a different kind of engagement. But there were still doubts that crept in like unwelcome guests. What if we never made it to that ring? What if life took us down a path that wasn't supposed to include marriage? I often found myself oscillating between exhilaration for the adventure we were shaping and fear that, in the end, it wouldn't be enough. So, I shared these misgivings with Daniel one night. Sitting by our flickering living room lamp, I admitted how I feared being seen as the one who diverted our course, the root of any uncertainty that lay ahead. What if you wanted that ring more than anything, and I've messed it all up? The vulnerability of my confession hung in the air, settling deep within us both. He took my hand, his touch steady and reassuring. You didn't mess anything up. We're being real about what we want, and that's powerful. Sometimes it's okay to step outside the script we've been given and write our own. His words washed over me, soothing the anxiety that had coiled tightly in my chest. In many ways, that moment defined our relationship. It was about honoring each other's dreams without losing sight of our own. As time passed, that tattoo began to feel more like home to me, a compass pointing towards our aspirations, guiding us forward in harmony. Each time I felt lost or anxious, I'd glance at my forearm as if the compass were whispering that I was on the right path. And so we continued our journey, both separately chasing individual dreams and together weaving a shared tapestry of experiences we could cherish. Life was unpredictable, but we embraced it, aware that every twist and turn only deepened our connection. In the end, as our next anniversary approached, we decided to take a staycation, just an escape into each other's company without the weight of the world pressing upon us. I couldn't help but wonder what the future had in store. Would we still be dreaming of that ring next year? Would we even want it anymore? We were slowly rewriting what love and commitment meant to us, and isn't that what truly matters? I realize now that life isn't about perfect paths, it's about the journey we carve out, and I'm grateful for every bump along the road, tattooed compass and all. I still can't say for sure whether deferring the ring was the right choice, but I often see the compass as a metaphor for us, navigating together, steering clear of the shallow and unnecessary, and embracing the depth of our evolving love story. Maybe it's okay not to have all the answers right now. I trust that with Daniel by my side, every step we take will be a step worth taking, each choice reflecting who we truly are, together. I never thought that my home-cooked meals would become a point of contention, especially when it came to my boyfriend's kids. When I first met Jake, he mentioned he had 2 children, and I braced myself for the whirlwind that would follow. But I didn't expect to fall in love with their chaotic energy. They were just 10 and 14, and while I found their quirks endearing, I was constantly reminded that they were also master negotiators, especially when it came to mealtime. It all came to a head one Sunday evening when I decided to whip up a hearty vegetable stir-fry. I'd spent a good 2 hours chopping veggies, prepping rice, and stirring in a homemade sauce, humming happily to my playlist as I filled the kitchen with mouth-watering aromas. When I set the table, I felt a sense of pride. Jake's kids, however, traipsed in and paused as if I had served them something alive. "What's that?" The younger one, Lily, wrinkled her nose. "Ew, I'm not eating that." The older one, Ben, joined in. "Yeah, can we just order pizza instead?" My heart sank. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this was a new family dynamic, and kids have a knack for testing boundaries. "Guys, I really put a lot of effort into this, and it's what's for dinner. You can eat it, or if you're not hungry, that's okay too." My voice was calm, but internally, I wrestled with a potential backlash. There was a powerful silence, thick with disbelief. I felt the stakes rise as they exchanged glances, confusion and defiance dancing in their eyes. "But it's gross," Lily protested, sinking into her chair with arms crossed. Anger flared up in me. Was I supposed to cater to their every whim? I felt a wave of frustration as their protests grew louder, but I forced myself to stay grounded. "Look," I said, trying to keep my tone steady, "I get that it's not your favorite, but you're old enough to try new things. How about just one bite? You can always have dessert afterward." The quiet stretched. I was ready to crack if they kept it up. The moment felt critical, like a lit fuse that could either fizzle out or explode. Finally, Jake stepped in, looking concerned as Ben and Lily glared at me. "Hey, lifelong battle with vegetables aside, can we at least try to support each other?" he said, trying to lighten the moment. With dramatic sighs that could shatter glass, they slid their forks into the stir-fry, which I must admit looked inviting enough. As they reluctantly chewed, I could see them grimace, but something unexpected happened next. Ben declared it almost edible, while Lily muttered that she could tolerate it if it meant dessert. We ended on a humorous note, and as the dinner progressed, I found myself laughing alongside them, the earlier tension dissipating. However, the aftermath gnawed at me. Had I overstepped a boundary? Was I that tyrannical figure in their lives that made mealtimes a game of compliance? Later, after I tucked the kids in, Jake brought up our earlier standoff gently. His hand warming my back. "I think you handled it well for a first time," he said. "It takes time for them to accept a new routine, you know?" I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Although I felt uncertain, a part of me appreciated that I stood my ground in an unfamiliar parenting territory. Sometimes cooking for a family is more than putting food on the table, it's about navigating new personalities and expectations. If I ever end up becoming a real part of their lives, I would need to find that balance, between discipline, understanding, and letting them choose their battles. I'd like to think I'm on the right track. I might even try another stir-fry next week, but not without a little prep work and maybe a fun cooking session with them beforehand. I'd want them on board, not just as a meal plan but as part of this crazy family journey we were on together. As I sat at the kitchen table, the remnants of last night's stir-fry still lingering in my mind, I couldn't shake off the feeling of uncertainty about how to move forward. The whole idea of being with someone who had kids was both exhilarating and daunting. I'd tried to visualize family meals as these blissful moments, laughter ricocheting off the walls, but in reality, I had clashed with Chris's kids over food more often than I'd care to admit. 11-year-old Ava had her heart set on pizza, the classic kid's choice, while her younger brother, Max, preferred nothing but chicken nuggets. And so, standing at the stove last night, chopping broccoli and bell peppers, I felt my resolve wane. "Eat what's for dinner or don't eat at all," I'd said, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders like a heavy blanket. The words had slipped from my mouth before I could catch them, a hardline stance that resonated into the silence of the kitchen, slicing through any chance of warmth. I understood it was unrealistic to expect them to embrace my culinary enthusiasm overnight. I thought about it long after dinner, my stomach heavy with the green beans I'd forced myself to eat, and I just couldn't shake that gnawing regret. Had I been too harsh? I would define my approach as teaching them to appreciate food, but in what way had I truly connected with them? After they had left the table, I contemplated the gap that had formed. Chris had tried to mitigate the situation, reassuring them and promising pizza tomorrow while sending me a poignant look, part apology and part "what were you thinking?" I understood he was in a tricky position, caught between his partner and his kids. That moment of clash weighed heavily, not just in the context of dinner but in the greater effort of blending our lives. I loved Chris, and I could see why this family meant the world to him, but after our first big rocky dinner together, I felt more like a bumbling intruder than a partner. The truth nagged at me, I craved connection, not confrontation. The shimmering vision of us coming together over a shared meal felt threatened by my own missteps. Were my expectations too high? I could sense my friends' voices echoing in my mind, suggesting a more lenient path, one that allowed kids to express their preferences without feeling bullied by adult tastes. I mulled over the idea of a pre-dinner meeting, a vote, perhaps? Pizza, stir-fry, or even tacos? I could picture the kids researching together, scrolling through recipes, maybe even sharing their wild ideas with me while chuckling over imagined concoctions. The next day, as the sun peeked through the kitchen window and spilled onto the counter, I took a deep breath and texted Chris. Can we set a family dinner meeting tonight? I think it could be fun. Just the kids and us, no pressure. To my relief, he responded almost immediately. Sure. I think they'll love it. I felt hope flutter within me as we assembled that evening around the kitchen table, the atmosphere different already, with art supplies scattered across one side as a backdrop to our conversation. Okay, team, before we plan our dinner, how was your day? I asked, trying to start light. Max was engrossed in his drawing, which was surprisingly good, while Ava had found a way to channel her impatience into a few clever comments about vegetables being growing food. We talked and laughed, and slowly I noticed a change in our dynamics. When I suggested we had to make a plan for the week, they didn't immediately groan. Instead, Ava perked up, saying, "Can we have taco night? We can make them." And just like that, the children were engaged. They reveled in the idea of crafting their own tacos, discussing toppings, and experimenting with what they'd like to adorn this new creation. I felt a warmth bloom in my chest, that elusive sensation of family forming the way broth warms soup. I took a step back and decided to let them lead. After all, cooking was a journey, not a destination. Dinner rolled around the next week, and together we peeled avocados, shredded cheese, and dashed spices back and forth like our own culinary dance, the kitchen buzzing with chatter and laughter. Chris must have felt the shift too, because his smile spanned ear to ear as he watched the three of us concoct our masterpieces. That night, not only did we eat together, but we also forged a deeper sense of understanding. As I watched Max carefully pile his toppings, his face a mix of concentration and delight, I realized this was more than just about making meals. This was about making memories, bridging experiences, and, hopefully, inviting them into my world just as they welcomed me into theirs. A week later, while we all sat on the couch, the remnants of dinner still wafting through the air, Ava turned to me and asked shyly, "Can we try that stir-fry again next week?" I chuckled, knowing she had probably come to accept that sometimes we have to eat things we might not prefer. "Absolutely, if we can do it together," I replied, feeling a soothing sense of victory wash over me. As I leaned back and heard their laughter fill the room, I finally recognized the beauty in our shared chaos, a family finding its rhythm, with all its flavors, challenges, and laughter. The journey ahead, filled with learning and experimenting, felt like the perfect adventure. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had crossed a threshold together, from mere coexistence into a budding family dynamic that was starting to feel genuine. Each evening, the dinner table became more than just a place to eat, it transformed into a communal hub of laughter, arguments over whether to have chicken nuggets or homemade tacos, and surprisingly deep conversations about their day. I found myself cherishing the little moments, the way Oliver would scrunch his face at broccoli but listen while I told him about how important it was for his growing body, or the way Ava started to try new foods, albeit slowly, but it felt like small victories on this journey of culinary diplomacy. One particular Saturday, we took my idea of a cooking session and made it a whole event. I took them to the local market, and it was incredible to see their eyes light up at the array of colors, bright red tomatoes, vibrant orange peppers, and greens that looked like they belonged in a painting. The way they picked out their favorite ingredients to create our next family meal made me feel like we were all inches closer to blending our lives. The joy wasn't just in the act of cooking, it was in each tiny choice they made, how their personalities shone through. As we prepped dinner that night, laughter echoed along with the clattering of pots and pans. There was flour everywhere, Ava had managed to get some on her nose, and even Oliver, who had once been wholly indifferent toward helping, had a spatula in hand, flipping pancakes with a kind of determination that made me proud. I wanted to capture that moment forever, the three of us dancing around the kitchen like we owned the place. As we sat down together with plates filled with pancakes drizzled with syrup and fresh fruit, the atmosphere was warm and inviting. My heart felt full. Yet, amidst the laughter and antics, something did gnaw at me. I was reminded of that initial conflict. Should I have been firmer with my expectations? It danced in the back of my mind like an uninvited guest. I recalled the times I made comments about their choices or pushed them to embrace something they initially refused. I wondered if I was setting them up for failure in adapting to a household that didn't bend to their every whim. I let it linger in my thoughts, willing to explore the line between being a nurturer and a figure of authority. But every smile from them, every bit of that sincere joy we created together felt like an affirming hug around my doubts. That upcoming week, we tried the stir-fry together. They didn't just help, they took ownership. Ava insisted on chopping the vegetables, creating little shapes out of the bell peppers like they were pieces of art, and Oliver surprised us all by deciding he wanted his pieces a bit bigger because, in his words, everything tastes better in massive bites. Watching them engage in our meal with excitement and investment settled something deep within me, the realization that as challenging as it might be to find the right balance, it was also utterly rewarding. I felt like I was gaining not just their trust, but a glimpse into how our little family was beginning to develop our rhythm, a rhythm that celebrated our mismatched notes as much as the harmonies we found along the way. Fast forward to a sunny Sunday a few weeks later, and I found myself standing in our kitchen, a vibrant smell wafting through the air as we prepared an extravagant dinner meant to celebrate the end of the week. After weeks of navigating some bumps and missteps, the kids still had their moments of pushback, but I had noticed they were beginning to voice their preferences more constructively. As I was stirring a pot, Ava casually shared how she appreciated being listened to during our cooking sessions. Oliver chimed in that he liked knowing he could suggest things without judgment. It hit me harder than I expected. Here, amidst the flour and chopping boards, we were building something real. Reflecting on it later that night, I realized I had been questioning myself an awful lot. What age do you cross from merely being a parent figure to someone they could genuinely trust? The love I felt for those two kids grew each day, and the connection we forged deepened beautifully. Maybe, just maybe, family really is about creating a safe space, where all the flavors are welcome, where every spice has its purpose. I laid in bed that night, the remnants of laughter still echoing in my mind and warmth radiating from my heart, and for the first time, I believed we were truly becoming what I had always imagined we'd be, a family. It was a Saturday afternoon when I found myself sitting across from my younger brother, Sam, in our favorite coffee shop, the air filled with the rich aroma of brewing espresso and baked goods that set my nerves on edge more than I cared to admit. I loved Sam, really, he was funny and sweet, but sometimes his quirks, an endearing part of his autism, would test my patience. As he meticulously explained the minutiae of a video game I had no interest in, he kept pausing to correct me whenever I mispronounced a character's name or misunderstood the plot. I could feel the familiar irritation bubbling up, making me wonder if I was the only one who noticed. "You don't have to correct me every single time," I finally blurted out, looking down at my coffee cup as if I were trying to see my own troubled reflection in the dark liquid. The cafe was buzzing around us, but in that moment, it felt like we were in our own world, one where I was both the older sibling and, apparently, the villain. I looked at Sam, his expression shifting from shock to hurt, and immediately wanted to retract my words. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that." But he didn't reply, just stared at his half-eaten muffin, as if the crumbs had suddenly become the most interesting thing in the room. I knew I should have just let him share his passion without interruption. After all, this was what made Sam happy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had lost my temper and crossed a line. My thoughts raced, I was tired, overwhelmed with work and everyday life's pressures, yet here was my brother, excitedly sharing a piece of his world with me. Shouldn't I be more supportive? And yet, this constant need for accuracy felt suffocating at times. The more I thought about it, the more frustrated I became with myself. My silence hung heavy between us until he finally whispered, "I just want to help." In that moment, it hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't merely about a character's name. It was about Sam wanting to connect, to share his knowledge, and my dismissiveness had dimmed that spark. As we left the cafe, I resolved to be more patient, to remember that my brother's corrections didn't stem from a desire to belittle me but from a place of connection, even if it sometimes felt stifling. A couple of weeks later, I found myself texting him random things I was learning from a podcast about his favorite games, asking for his thoughts and deepening our conversations. We still had our moments, sure, I still occasionally winced when he'd launch into a correction I didn't ask for. But each time it happened, I reminded myself why I loved hearing him speak about his passions, and I found my frustrations melting away. I'd like to think I wasn't the asshole in this story after all, but someone learning to navigate this complex bond. It was a rainy Saturday afternoon when it hit me just how much progress we'd made. I was curled up on the couch with a steaming mug of tea, listening to the sound of raindrops tapping against the window, and I had this overwhelming urge to share something exciting I'd learned about an upcoming game release that we'd both been anticipating. Instead of the involuntary dread I usually felt, I picked up my phone, hesitated for just a moment, and texted him. "Hey, I just read they're adding an interdimensional feature to the new game, can you believe it?" Within seconds, my brother's text alert chimed. "Yeah. Interdimensional travel means they could really expand the story. I hope they keep the parallel universe idea in mind." I felt a surge of warmth in my chest, a connection that felt more genuine than any correction he'd ever thrown my way. It was moments like these that reminded me how deep our bond ran, masked beneath layers of quirks and differences. Of course, that didn't mean everything was perfect. Just a week later, I made the seemingly innocent mistake of calling one of the game characters a villain during one of our usual gaming sessions. Almost instantly, he shot back a correction, pointing out that the character's motives were far more complex than my casual label suggested. "You know his backstory is about redemption, right? You can't just label him like that." I felt the familiar sting of irritation creeping back in, but I paused. I was about to reply with a snarky retort when I remembered the conversations we had been sharing, the laughter and insights eclipsing the corrections. Instead, I took a breath and said, "Fair point. I needed that reminder. I sometimes get way too caught up in my impressions." His surprise was palpable even through the screen. "Glad you see it that way. The story is nuanced. Learning and understanding make it even more exciting." He didn't know it, but I was beginning to feel the weight of my previous frustrations lift, replaced with a sense of appreciation for how much more he had to offer. Slowly, I started consciously approaching our conversations with curiosity rather than defensiveness. Sometimes I'd even invite his corrections, framing them as challenges rather than annoyances. It became a game of sorts. What knowledge could he share next? Our hangouts transformed from mere game nights into deep dives where he could geek out about characters, plot points, and storytelling techniques. Yes, I still occasionally winced at the over-explanations or overly detailed corrections, but now, instead of seeing them as bothersome interruptions, I began to find them oddly charming. They were pieces of my brother that shaped him into who he was, a passionate perfectionist with a heart bursting at the seams for his interests. I also discovered that in those moments of explaining, something beautiful happened. We were bonding over the nuances of the narratives we both adored. One Sunday, we decided to take a break from our usual weekend routine to watch a movie marathon based on some of our favorite game franchises. A few hours in, I noticed something magical unfolding. He was animated, speaking excitedly about how he would adapt the stories differently. "You know, if I were to write this, I'd change the ending completely. It's not true to the character's development," he said, eyes bright with enthusiasm. Instead of asking him to dial it back or find a quieter volume, I just smiled and nodded, letting his passion wash over me like an invigorating wave. I chimed in with my own ideas, and before long, we were brainstorming a story of our own, piecing together plot lines and character arcs as if screenwriting was a game in itself. It felt like both of us were learning in that moment, not just about the movies or games we loved, but about each other, who we were as siblings, and how we could evolve. I had to admit, there was something healing about this shift. I've learned that sometimes, it takes a little vulnerability to bring two people closer. Maybe I wasn't just tolerating his corrections anymore. Maybe I was actually embracing his perspective, recognizing that our divergent approaches were a tapestry that made our relationship rich and vibrant. As the rain continued to patter softly against the windows, I luxuriated in the knowledge that we were navigating this complex relationship together. I found myself feeling grateful, hoping that even as my brother poured out corrections, I could do my part to help him see that his voice mattered to me. It may still get complicated sometimes, but I felt that complexity was what made our bond so beautifully unique. And maybe, just maybe, it was this all-encompassing journey through learning and understanding that turned out to be the real win. One quiet afternoon, as I perched on the edge of my bed, fully immersed in the imaginary worlds of my favorite fantasy novel, my phone buzzed insistently. It was him, of course, my brother, the ever-passionate encyclopedia of all things gaming. I felt a tingle of excitement mixed with a hint of anxiety, that familiar nod as I wondered if this text would be another innocent inquiry or a deep dive into one of his meticulous corrections. Did you know that in the lore of Arcadia, the main character actually has a hidden backstory that ties in with the prophecy? I smiled at his enthusiasm, picturing him animatedly pacing around his room while typing. "Yeah, I just learned about that on a podcast," I replied, careful to convey my interest. That's when he dropped it. "I'm glad you like it, but you actually missed a couple of key points. You see." And there it was, that familiar avalanche of information I hadn't asked for, cascading down like an unexpected rain shower. My first instinct was to feel that familiar frustration rising, a heat creeping up my neck. But this time something clicked inside me. Instead of letting that prickly feeling take hold, I chose to breathe, sinking deeper into the moment, feeling the vulnerability behind his enthusiasm. I wasn't just being corrected, I was witnessing his excitement and love for a topic that mattered deeply to him. "Dude, I really appreciate you sharing this with me," I texted back, "and I'm totally here for the details. But I also want to dive into this together, you know? I want to connect over it, not just absorb facts." There was a pause, and for a moment, I worried I might have crossed a line again. But a few moments later, my phone chimed with his reply. "Okay, I can try that. I just get really excited, and I want you to know everything." And in those few exchanged messages, I felt like I was glimpsing a new layer of our relationship, one built on understanding, empathy, and respect. The rain continued to rhythmically tap against the glass, a soothing soundtrack to my thoughts as I contemplated how this new approach could alleviate that tension that sometimes bubbled between us. It felt like stepping into a dance. I was learning the rhythm, realizing I didn't have to lead or follow, just move together. In the weeks that followed, our conversations evolved in unexpected ways. We began sharing our interpretations of his favorite games, parsing through characters and plots, discovering that sharing ideas was just as enriching as correcting each other. One Thursday evening, we settled down for a marathon of an old game, the kind that made us both nostalgic. As I stumbled through levels and faced wily enemies, he grinned at my blunders but hesitated to correct me. Instead, he cheered me on, his encouragement washing over me like a warm breeze. I could feel the shift in our dynamic, like turning a page in a book where the story finally aligns. By the time I slammed that virtual sword into the final boss, we both erupted into cheers, the air thick with camaraderie. It was genuine. It was beautiful. Reflecting on our journey, I realized we were two flawed yet perfectly unique characters navigating this intricate world together, learning to appreciate each other's quirks. Sure, there might be hiccups now and then, maybe some unexpected corrections still would slip through, but now, when they did, I'd remind myself of this growth, this bond that was as rich and vibrant as the stories woven into our favorite games. Looking back, I didn't just learn how to handle those moments of correction, I learned to cherish our conversations, seeing them as threads that connected us in ways I never fully understood before. This journey wasn't just about me, it was about us building and redefining how we communicated. And as I sank into my pillow that night, listening to the pitter-patter of the rain, I felt so much more at peace with the trials of our relationship, grateful to navigate this complex tapestry together, wondering what stories we would continue to weave as we journeyed forward.